Okay, couple of quick changes, as quick as I could make them. League of Legends Season 14 is ending on January 7th. So it's December 6th right now, so we have about 1 month left in the season. So any last minute climbing that you want to get in, any goals you're trying to get to before the end of the season, now is the time to put the pedal to the metal and hit the grindstone, or whatever that saying is. So that's important to note. And then this is actually pretty big, and I've heard a couple of people talking about this. There's this article about it. I didn't find anything from Riot specifically about it, but it's probably somewhere. I assume that this is coming. Is they are really changing the impact that the honor system has, and I think that the change is pretty sweeping, so it's pretty consequential and as a result probably controversial. So basically the way that this is going to work is if you're honor level 0 or honor level 1, you're not going to have access to the all chat, the champion select chat, and the post game chat. And of course, you already didn't get any rank split rewards for being honor level 1 or honor level 0. And then at level 2, you don't have access to all chat, but you do have access to champion select chat and post game chat. So if there's one thing I've learned from talking to people, reading people's comments, and interacting with more and more people who play the game, it's that people play the game for very different reasons. And I think that if you're a more casual player and you're playing normal games with your friends, you're going to say, this is a great change. I don't understand how anybody could be lower than honor level 3 or whatever, or even honor level 5. There's no reason why somebody who's honor level 0, this imaginary mean person I can't even imagine, there's no reason why this person should be typing in my game. But if you're a more competitive player, which obviously a lot of people are, a lot of people who watch this channel who are trying to get better at the game, probably take the game a little bit more seriously, a little bit more competitive. Especially for me as like a high elo competitive player, I understand that the more invested you get into the game, the easier it is. Even if you're generally a pretty non-toxic, nice person, there are going to be strings of games or a game here and there where you just kind of lose it and say some things that you shouldn't say, sometimes for totally, like, not that it's justified, but based on what's happening in the game, for pretty good reason, right? It happens every once in a while. I mean, if you imagine, like I've said before, I've probably played 10,000 ranked games at this point, and peaked in GM. And imagine out of 10,000 ranked games, imagine the worst ranked game I've ever experienced, right? Thank God I don't remember. I probably, I blocked it out of my memory. But think of the worst ranked game that I've played out of 10,000 games. Like, think you queue up and you play 10 games in a day, you're going to have one game. Most times you play 10 games, you're going to have one game that really stinks, right? So imagine out of 10,000 games, what my worst game I ever experienced was like, where I'm playing absolutely perfectly and every single one of my teammates is a complete clown. But actually, those you just usually lose in 14, 15 minutes tend not to be even that frustrating. It's just like, I don't even, especially me, I don't even tend to get mad at those people. I'm just like kind of upset at that point with matchmaking for being so bad. But I think to myself, like, man, these guys blow. I need to rank up and get out of these guys' elo because this is not good. It's actually the games that are close, where maybe half of your team is good and half of your team is absolute dog water, that it's those close games, those middle ground games where maybe if I was just a little bit better, but I'm already playing so well, but maybe if I just play perfectly instead of really well, we would have won. But it's so hard to carry these people across the finish line. It's those games that get really frustrating. So you can imagine, right, there are going to be, if you take the 10 worst ranked games I've experienced in 10,000 games, they're pretty bad. And as somebody who takes the game really seriously, has put a lot of time into it, and has gotten to, really top ranks, you're going to get frustrated when you're in those games, even if you're a nice person. That's just the way that it is, And so there have been many times where I I'm honor level 5 right now. I usually sit around honor level 4 or 5. There have been plenty of times where I've gotten chat restricted and moved down to honor level 0, and then you build your honor back up, and then you get chat restricted. It just happens, maybe once every 6 months, once a year, or something like that. For high elo competitive players, it just happens. Even for nice people, there are very few very competitive high elo players who will go a very, very long period of time without ever getting any sort of punishment. And whenever you get any sort of punishment, even just like a 3-game chat restriction, it instantly takes your honor level, I believe, all the way down from honor level 5 all the way down to honor level 0. Maybe that's the issue with the honor system, and that could be another way they could solve this. The thing that I see being a really big issue with this is that if you lose access to the champion select chat, you're not going to be able to tell your teammates that you're auto-filled. You're not going to be able to ask to trade roles with somebody. And let's say I was a perfect player who was always honor level 5 and never had any chat issues. I still wouldn't like this change if I care about ranked and I care about the game being competitive, because I want to know if my teammates auto-filled, because I want to have the opportunity to potentially either trade roles in a way that's going to be beneficial for our team, or we can just dodge the game. Even if I don't necessarily feel like dodging for that person, at least our whole team knows that somebody's auto-filled, and our team is more likely as a whole to dodge, and so we're more likely to dodge these games. So for example, for me, whenever I get filled or put into a secondary role, I'm pretty much always going to dodge. Sometimes I'll play it out, right? Mistake to play it out, but sometimes I'll play it out. But most of the time I'll dodge, and I'll say like support pref, and see if anybody wants to play the role that I've gotten, and if they don't, usually I dodge, right? That's just what most high elo players do, as if they're serious about playing ranked, is they're not going to play a bunch of games off their main role. Doesn't make any sense. It's a waste of everybody's time. So you're letting your team know, hey, if you can play my role, maybe we could have a better chance of winning this game, or let's just dodge the game because it's going to be a low quality waste of time and we're going to lose LP. So why would you want to take that ability away from people? And that's the main thing that people communicate in Champion Select anyways. Maybe the second thing to that is like, for me, especially as a sport, a lot of times I have a choice between taking Ignite and Exhaust. There's definitely a lot of communication about between bot laners about like what summoner spells you want to take. Like, do you want to take heal and I take barrier? Do you want me to take Ignite and we play aggressive in this lane, or do you want me to take Exhaust? Those conversations happen, and while they may not happen every game, or they may not happen at a lower elo, these conversations happen. And even if the other stuff is maybe more prevalent, like the random nonsense, like people just saying random stuff in Champion Select has very little to do with honor level, I think, and is mostly just random miscellaneous stuff. So I think when it comes to actual stuff that you could categorize, it's like these serious conversations about like what role am I going to play, and what summoner spells are we going to take, and stuff like that are actually quite important and do happen, especially in higher elo. And I think taking that away is really bad, because it means in higher elo, a lot of games are going to go through that would just have been dodged if people knew that this person was filled, or could have been, role swap could have been initiated because somebody can play another role, and then things would have gone much smoother. So I think that that's just bad for everyone, even non-toxic players. For honor level 2, getting access to everything but all chat. All chat doesn't matter, so that's fine. I think that that's a fine change if you want to take all chat away as a punishment, because that doesn't really affect like me as that person's teammate. It doesn't affect our ability to win the game. And then keep in mind, like I said, that really you have honor level 0 and honor level 1. So like this talks about like honor level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But in reality, honor level 0 is a level. And so I think, people, I guess, aren't thinking about this, but like it's not just level 1. There's like, it's a longer process to get to level 2 if you're level 0 than it is to get from like, let's say level 2 to level 3. It's a longer process. So, with that being said, I think I either don't like this change, and I think competitive players will not like this change because of the lack of ability to communicate and champion select. Other than that, it would be mostly fine. And then I think if you just get chat restricted for 3 games or whatever, you should not be going all the way back down to honor level 0. Maybe it should bump your honor level down 1. I don't know why there's no punishment that just slightly hits your honor. Why does it have to be a complete reset over and over again? Because it feels like I'm either honor level 5 or honor level 0, and climbing back in between. Just because every once in 6 months or once in a year I say something during a game that I shouldn't have said, and I get a three game chat restriction or something like that, now my honor is completely reset. And if it happens at the end of the year, I lose all of my ranked rewards, even though the entire year I got 1 3-day chat restriction for saying somebody was an idiot at the end of the season or something like that. It's just completely ridiculous, Also, like, again, for a competitive game that's supposed to be a competitive game, and in ranked people take it very seriously, and competitively it's obviously one of the top most played competitive games. Babying and dumbing down the chat and like preventing people from being able to banter and even from being a little bit toxic, I think is just bad for the game. I think that any serious competitive game should have more free speech and the ability for you to like be a little bit edgier with what you're saying than not saying, or than normal. So I get if you're playing Club Penguin, you're not going to be able to tell your jungler to like Caitlyn headshot IRL, and I don't think that should be acceptable necessarily in League. Obviously that's pushing it, right? But should I be able to tell my jungler that he's a moron? Absolutely. Right? 100%. That's part of what League is. And to deny that, I think, is problematic, and will hurt the game the more you take that ability away from people. Because the type of people who play a competitive game in the first place are going to want to, like, they're going to take the game seriously. They're going to be passionate players, and they're going to tell people off, and they're going to banter with the enemy team, and they're going to banter with their teammates, or they're going to straight up get mad at their teammates, and that's fine. If you had a game where nobody cares enough to get frustrated with their teammates, you wouldn't have a competitive game. You would have Club Penguin, or Fortnite or Minecraft or something. So with that being said, let League of Legends be League of Legends. Let the competitive players breathe in ranked, and let the people who are having fun with their friends in normal games do their thing. Let's see. Oh, one other thing I want to say about this too is, generally speaking, we all know that in League, people who chat tend to get punished more than people who are trolling by playing the game a certain way. And really, that's just a problem with how hard it is to consistently detect the way that people are playing, and to be able to consistently, with very high certainty, say, okay, this person's actually trolling, not this person's having a bad game, or this person tried a champion they don't know how to play and got destroyed, or this person took a month-long break and came back and they're rusty. We're talking about, like, because those things happen, but you need to be able to consistently identify, without banning anyone mistakenly, or very, very, very few people. You need to be able to identify that this person's, the way that they're playing the game is actually intentionally bad. And that's very hard, especially because people play the game intentionally bad in many different ways. And obviously, their detection for like somebody actually running it down mid over and over again is pretty decent, I would say. But nobody does that, right? Like, nobody's actually going to, well, some people do, but they're going to get banned. Like, most people who are slowly kind of soft trolling games are not going to get banned. So another issue that I have with this is the punishment, I think, especially because we just talked about, you just go, even a pretty, like, typically nice person, honorable player, has those couple of bad games a year where they get pretty toxic. Like, that person's going from honor level 5 to honor level 0, off of a couple of games, sometimes just one game. Whereas you'll have somebody who soft ints 50 games throughout the season and nothing ever happens to them. So we already feel like there's an imbalance between holding the players who are actually trolling games accountable versus the people who are like typing. And I think it gets worse if you continue to up the restrictions for typing and you're doing nothing about the way that people are playing the game. And it's a response thing. I think the reason why this frustrates so many people is, especially for a player like me, again, somebody who's mostly honorable but has toxic games every once in a while, like most of us. It's frustrating because we know that a lot of times when we get toxic, it's a response to somebody playing the game in a toxic way, right? Somebody who's really trolling, or somebody who's actually like legitimately boosted, playing in a rank they definitely don't belong in. Like, I'm talking about, like, I'll look up their op.gg during the middle of the game and they have summoner spell swap, role swap, champion swapped, playing in Masters. And I'm like, okay, this guy's just boosted, and he's lost his last 10 games in a row since the summoner spell's changed, you know? And I'm like, okay, like, this guy's boosted. He's intentionally ruining my game and all of the games that he's playing in. He's not getting banned. And if I so much as like use a swear word, I'm going to get chat restricted and go from honor level 5 to honor level 0 off of 1 or 2 games, when this guy is literally trolling every single game, and all I'm doing is calling him out for it, right? So you have situations like that where you have somebody who's soft trolling the game because they got upset. So I had a player just yesterday, actually, when I was playing with, I was duoing with my friend who plays mid. We had an AD carry who actually just said he got off of a 30-day chat restriction, but this is also a player who ruins games with the ways that he plays, not just with his chatting. And so this player had just gotten off a 30-game chat restriction. He said that in Champion Select. And then we get into game, and he just dies level 2 bot lane. Like, nothing I could do to save him. He just dies level 2 bot lane. And then I walk mid because I'm like, okay, this guy's pretty bad bot, and I'm just going to see if I can roam mid here and do something for my mid laner. He walks back into bot lane, dies the second he gets back into bot lane, and then starts spam pinging me because I'm trying to roam mid, and the roam didn't work out. Like, I jump in, try to see what I can do. We don't end up getting a kill. It just wasn't that good of a timing, but doesn't matter. Like, any support off of base and high elo is going to look somewhere else and then come back bot right away. Totally fine play. The guy blames me for dying the second time in like 3 or 4 minutes, and then decides, he says he was doing this fake positivity thing in chat because he had been chat restricted, and then he said, I'm going mid, or I guess we're all going mid, and he just runs mid and starts playing mid for the rest of the game. He just laned mid. So my duo, who actually mains and plays mid, is now playing Zed bot lane for the rest of the game, right? When you have a player like that, if I use too harsh of words to criticize that person for forcing my friend and my duo to play a role that he didn't queue up for, after he inted to, after he played bad and died 2 times, this is a Masters lobby, by the way. If I criticize that guy too harshly, I'm going to get chat restricted, not get ranked end of season rewards, and drop all the way from honor level 5 to honor level 0 if I use a couple of wrong words. Whereas that guy controlled the entire game, die a bunch, and then the game's over and we lost in like 15 minutes or whatever. He can do that, but I can't say anything about it. That's really, really frustrating for a lot of people, and that imbalance is something that I think really tilts people about this. So anyways, there's more that could be said about the honor system, but I don't really think that that's such a good change. So, I've been spending a lot of time with family for Thanksgiving, so I am completely behind on what's going on with the game. And I think it's kind of interesting because, obviously if you're somebody who keeps up with the patches consistently, you probably, like I would normally do if I was keeping up, is you probably see a video once every 2 weeks or so covering the patch notes. and that's fine. That's what I normally do. You know, I'll go watch LS's patch rundown or whatever. Some people like to watch Freaks, whatever the case may be. Sometimes I do my own when I'm actually keeping track, which is not very much. But I've missed something like 4 patches in a row. And honestly, I wouldn't care that much, except everybody's building Yun Tal on AD carry, which I thought was a terrible item, or was a terrible item, let's say, when it first came out. So obviously something changed. And some people asked me what I thought about these changes. So what we're going to do is probably going to take a while, but we're going to focus on, we're going to run through like 4 patches at once. So what I was going to say is it might be interesting, rather than doing one patch, there's 2 things. One is that we're going to go through like 4 patches at once. So we're going to get to see how the game changed, not just in one patch at one point in time, but how it's changed over like a month or 2 months, which is interesting because I think that oftentimes when we look at patches, we're just looking at that one thing. And then the other thing is, because people put those patch videos out the day that they're released, you're not necessarily knowing how things are changing after the fact over time. You know, what did they end up reverting that they ended up changing in the first place? How did these things shift the meta? What champions are being picked? All that. We'll actually go to op.gg as well, and we can take a look at what champions are being picked the most in different roles. You know, I'm most curious, like I said, about the changes to AD carry, because I think it really shook up the landscape. So we will focus on the systems changes here probably. So, but I will briefly go through everything, but we'll focus on the items. So let's see, maybe we should just start with the items and go a little bit out of order. I think we'll do that. I'm going to start by just going over the items and these system changes at the end of the patches, so that, you know, if you're only interested, because a lot of people I assume have seen the champion changes and are not behind like me, like a month. So I'll just go through the systems changes real quick and give my thoughts on those, and we'll see how those evolved. And then we'll do the champion changes separately, in case you just never follow the patch notes at all. Let's see. Okay, so where are the system changes here? So in patch 1420, they started changing and adjusting AD carry items. And most notably, I'm interested in like Collector and Yun Tal, because I'm seeing these a lot more than before. And it looks to me like, you know, Caitlyn, Jhin, I've been seeing those champions a lot more than I used to on previous patches. And obviously this is 1420, so we're 4 patches later and they're still very dominant. You know, so I'm very curious about what happened to these items and what happened to these champions in particular. And 4 patches is a long time. I don't know if they're on a slightly different schedule, but usually patches are supposed to be every 2 weeks, between Tuesday and Wednesday, but they might have been doing a patch every week. So I'm really not sure what's going on. Let's see. So for AD carry items, we're adjusting the first slot legendaries for many crit AD carries this patch. Well, we hit our goals of flatly nerfing everything last patch. So where we left off, just to get my brain in line, is they had just nerfed all of the items power level by, you know, about 12% or so. So that was, you know, the major change that happened before this. So we ended up shifting some items into spots where there was no reason to pick them. True. We're lightly buffing Collector and Yun Tal. Well, lightly is a choice word there, by making them significantly cheaper. We're lightly buffing by making them significantly cheaper. That's a funny way to put it, because I would venture to say that if you made an item significantly cheaper, the item might be significantly better, not lightly buffed. But, you know, I'll leave the math to Freak. Allowing crit ADCs to hit one item at similar times to other classes. Okay. They're still tied to scaling with more critical strike chance, but now they'll stand out as actual slot 1 items instead of just worse Infinity Edge. Okay. this is a little bit of a dangerous line of thinking. I'm not going to say it's entirely incorrect, because AD carries have been weak for a while in some ways. So I don't think it's terrible if AD carries get buffed compared to other classes. But yes, AD carries will always still be tied to gold and getting 3 or 4 items, etc., and more and more and more items. But if their first item is just as good as every other class, then a class that's meant to be gold scaling, that's stronger or strong at their first item, is just going to be too powerful compared to other classes. And so AD carries that get a really strong 1-item power spike, early game AD carries, champions that build collector first, like a Jhin. I don't know if Caitlyn's building collector first, but probably similar to a Caitlyn. Let's see what she's building. Yeah, she's going collector first. So you've got 2 champions that are in NA. This is really impressive. 40% of the pick rate in Emerald Plus are Caitlyn and Jhin. I think even Jinx in some of her builds goes collector first. No, she's going Yun Tal first. Okay. I've seen people... Maybe my AD carry was trolling last game. Okay, anyways. So, that's the problem, is I'm already seeing, before we've even gotten into the item changes, that if you significantly buff AD carry's first item, AD carries are supposed to be weaker than other classes' first item. That's one of the reasons why, if you just think about it, how it should logically work, AD carries are scaling champions. They scale off of getting a lot of gold, so they should be weaker 1 item to 1 item, and AD carry should be weaker than other classes. In general, their impact across the board. 1v1, it really depends on the type of class. AD carry is going to lose to most classes, right? They're going to lose to a tank 1v1, especially if the tank gets onto them. They're going to lose to any melee champion if the melee champion gets onto them. They're going to lose to an assassin. But if they can't get onto them, if the AD carry has superior positioning, good dodging, they're going to output a lot of DPS. But even still, the DPS that they put, even if they're playing things on average, for their elo, an average AD carry in that elo should not be dominating with 1 item. They are supposed to be slightly weaker than other classes at 1 item, because as a trade-off for being slightly weaker at 1 item, like a scaling champion has a trade-off, at 3 items or at 4 items, they're so much more capable of carrying the game and more powerful than those other classes, that at 3 or 4 items, that's where AD carries get to really stand out. But if AD carries are actually able to be really good at 1 item, then you're going to see early game AD carries like Caitlyn and Jhin be very dominant if their 1 item power spike is too powerful. And you're also going to see, in solo queue, why wait, or play a champion that relies on getting 3 or 4 items, which takes forever, and most games are already kind of decided by then, as opposed to playing a champion that's going to dictate the game very, very quickly. This is a big issue. So I can already tell the problem that they've created without, just from the couple of games I played since I came back, and seeing the champions that I'm seeing and looking at those pick rates, without even seeing any numbers, it's already doomed. Okay, so they're lightly buffing the items by making them significantly cheaper. They're allowing crit AD carries to have a 1 item power spike similar to other classes, even though that is busted, because AD carries will be stronger at 1 item and at 3 items, which is a lot, because there should be a downside to being stronger later. And obviously champions that can really abuse that 1 item are going to be really strong. On Statikk Shiv's side, it just ended up a bit stronger than other options, so we're delivering a light tap. So this is funny too, because I don't see Statikk Shiv much at all anymore. And so it's interesting, because another early game item that you could go besides collector or something like this would be like a Statikk Shiv. A lot of these champions would go Statikk Shiv first. But whatever their light tap was to Statikk Shiv completely killed the item. So they went way too hard with Yun Tal and collector, and they went way too... they buffed it too much, and then they went way too hard on nerfing Statikk Shiv. Lastly, Essence Reaver's changes are meant to be power neutral, with the stat reduction appropriate for its price reduction. As with Yun Tal and Collector, we want it to be enticing in the first slot. Okay, so Essence Reaver, they're making it cheaper so that AD carries can get that first item around the same time that some other classes do. So they reduced the price from $3,150 to $2,900, and they gave it a reduction of 5. So they took away 5 attack damage and 5 ability haste to make up for the cost change that they did. And then they changed the recipe to Pickaxe, Caulfield's Warhammer, and Cloak of Agility from BF Sword. So they just changed the BF Sword to a Pickaxe. So let's see, are there any Essence Reaver champions in here? No. I mean, maybe Corky, Ezreal, Draven, maybe Lucian. No. I mean, I guess sort of, not really. No, they're just all going Triforce still. Draven's not building it. So Lucian is the only, and that's what I was going to say. Lucian's the only champion. I'm assuming MF doesn't. She goes lethality. So Lucian's the only champion that's going Essence Reaver. I guess it's not terrible because obviously they didn't like crazy overshoot with Essence Reaver. It probably slightly helped Lucian or something like that. So let's see if we can see real quick. Maybe we should pull it up on like Lolalytics or something. Can we see what happened to his win rate over the past couple of patches? So since 1420, I mean, I guess it buffed his win rate, but it didn't really do anything. Okay, so the Essence Reaver change did absolutely nothing. The Collector, I mean, this is a big change because with Essence Reaver, we brought it down 250 gold. With Collector, we brought it down 450 gold. And on this one, we took away 5 attack damage and 5 ability haste. On this one, we took away 10 attack damage. So I would say that like 5 ability haste and 5 attack damage, roughly similar to 10 attack damage, yet Collector got 450 gold cheaper. So that is significantly cheaper, like they said, and that is going to make Collector significantly broken. You know, I don't know how they look at this and think, oh yeah, this is a really good idea. That is really crazy. Statikk Shiv, they took the attack speed down by 5%. Oh, that's not that big of a change. So I think the reason why I thought Statikk Shiv was like worse than it was is because Kaisa, I guess she is building Statikk Shiv sometimes. I'm not sure what these builds are. Maybe it changed back again in one of these patches. Oh yeah, it looks like it did. So it probably changed back, but I remember like looking at Kaisa during the middle of these couple of patches, and she wasn't ever building Statikk Shiv anymore. It was, and in game it was like recommending that I build Yun Tal on Kaisa, so I was like kind of confused what had just happened with the game, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to take a close look at this in the first place. So I think it was less that Statikk Shiv was nerfed hard, because this isn't that big of a change, and more that Yun Tal and other items were just buffed too much. Okay, so Yun Tal went down 250 gold, and it lost 5 attack damage, and the serrated edge damage went down by 10, and then the recipe changed to a pickaxe and a noon quiver, which is a lot nicer build path than Cloak of Agility. It makes it a really nice first item because it's got noon quiver in it. One of the things that was really confusing for a lot of AD carries, or I guess you could say still is they really want noon quiver because it's a really like good cost efficient item that gives you a good mix of attack damage and attack speed, which you need in the early game. And it's also like really helps with CSing quite a bit. And so one of the reasons why AD carries go Kraken and Statikk Shiv and items like that is primarily because those items had noon quiver in them, or at least they did in the past. And Also, the passives are pretty good on those items, but Noon Quiver was a big piece of it, I think, psychologically for AD carry players. And giving Noon Quiver to other items like Yun Tal to make them a little bit more viable as a first item, I think is a good change. Or like, this is, it seems like a neutral recipe change, but this is quite a positive change. So yeah, you can see that I think with 250 gold off of Yun Tal and especially with Collector, 450 gold is absolutely insane. And then we have some other stuff. I was mostly curious about AD carry items, but let's see what else they did. Damage per second to monsters on Faded Ashes went down by 5. So this nerf, like Brand and Zyra Jungle, were becoming more and more popular around this time. Liandry's Torment, same thing. The cap damage against monsters went down 10 from 50 to 40. Luden's Companion, they're limiting its burst damage. So fire damage 60 plus 4% AP to 75 plus 5% AP. So that's actually up. Repeated fire damage is now, instead of 50% of the initial damage, only 20% of the initial damage. And the maximum single target damage is way down from 210 to 150 and 14% AP to 10% AP. So this is kind of weird, because isn't this like the whole identity of the item is to burst somebody like this? Interesting. So just overall, pretty big nerf to Ludens, I would say. But that makes sense. The item was doing really well. Same thing with Storm Surge. 95 to 90 ability power, 150 to 125 damage, 15% AP to 10% AP. And then Thornmail, they took away 5 armor from Thornmail, and they upped the Thorns damage from 15 to 20. But then they reduced the damage based on your bonus armor to 10% instead of 15%. This is really bad. Like, Thornmail is a really bad item. I've talked about this before, because the main thing that you want is the anti-heal. Like, the main value when you build Thornmail, like what is giving you the most damage, or when you think about the item, like what active or passive or whatever am I getting that's doing the most? And it's the anti-heal when you're building the item, 100%. But you can get the anti-heal, the full anti-heal in Bramble Vest for only 800 gold. Decent chunk of the armor, a decent chunk of the damage that you're going to do. And then you just move on to your next item, and you have a mini Thornmail for much, much cheaper. And then you just come back and complete it as a 5th or a 6th item. So this item needed a lot of real buffs in order to actually finish the item and then move on to another item. And the weird thing about this is they're acting like we have to take away 5 armor if we buff its damage, and then we're not even going to go all the way through with buffing its damage, because we're going to take away 5% of your bonus armor. So if you have 100 bonus armor, let's see, 5% difference would be 5. So at 100 bonus armor, this is a net neutral change. So this would be, 15 plus 15 would be 30 if you have 100 armor. And this would be 20 plus 10, so it would also be 30. So if you have 100 bonus armor, this is neutral. And if you have more than 100 bonus armor, this is actually just a nerf to its damage. And who's building Thornmail? Mostly you want to complete Thornmail if you're playing Rammus or if you're playing Malphite. Champions who love Thornmail, like Rammus, for example, are already pretty bad champions. And they're just, why would they nerf this item that's already so bad? So if the type of champions that love building Thornmail are champions that have a lot of armor in their kit, and so it's actually just a nerf because it's giving you less total armor, and if you have more than 100 bonus armor, it's actually doing less Thorns damage. Which, that's just such a ridiculous change when the item's already so bad. This is like such a stupid change, actually. Okay, runes. They are saying, and let's read this because they talked about Unending Despair, which I've been saying Unending Despair is really good. Thornmail also ended up being one of the biggest winners of the patch and is currently the most built armor item in the game. Maybe I missed something about the last patch, but that's just dumb. There are other extremely good and underrated armor items, but most players haven't come to realize how good Unending Despair is yet. Yeah, that's true. So why are we nerfing? So they're nerfing Thornmail because they know that it's bad and people should be building other items, and they want to make it more obvious that it's bad. That is so dumb. That's crazy. Whatever. Okay, runes, phase rush, they changed the range movement speed from 15 to 40 to 18.75 to 37.5. So they're nerfing the movement speed for ranged a tiny bit. Melee movement speed, unchanged. Phase rush is technically receiving a gameplay change as a result of using up-to-date practices for its melee range split. In practice, this should be unnoticeable. Okay, so they nerfed the range movement speed on phase rush a tiny amount. Grasp. The healing is 3 plus 1.2% max health. Now it's 1.3% max health. Breaks even at 3,000 max health. So early Grasp is nerfed in terms of the healing, and you will get more healing once you have more than 3,000 max health. I think this is a totally fine change. Max health per stack, 7 to 4 for melee and range, to 5 melee, 3 range. Now that's a pretty big nerf. But there were a lot of champions like Mundo and stuff like that were abusing the item, so that's fine. Nimbus Cloak. Decaying movement speed 12 to 35% based on summoner spell cooldown to 14 to 40% based on summoner spell cooldown. So they increased the movement speed bonus by 2 to 5%. Okay, that just doesn't matter. ARAM, blah, blah, blah. We'll come back to the champion changes if I don't fall asleep. Okay, so systems. Okay, so we already talked about the objective bounty changes, I believe, in a different video. But basically, they're creating... I should talk about this more, though. So on a patch 14.21, they changed objective bounties to, instead of being this obscure thing where it's like which team has more dragons and towers and gold and XP, they rolled it into one simple thing, which is we're just going to base the bounty system purely on gold earned and lost, as opposed to kill and death streaks and relative amount of farm. So let's see, did they do objective bounties and champion bounties? So I think we've been through both, but it's probably good to remind myself, because when you have big complicated system changes like this, it's really easy to forget, even though I've been through this. My big thought on this, though, after it's been out now for a little while, even though I've been gone for a little bit, but my thoughts on this now are that one of the most underrated things right now, I mean, it's always been good, but one of the most underrated things right now is XP, because there is nothing left in the game. Well, XP and dragons, I guess you could say, and stuff like that. When you take away the system that calculates how far ahead your team is based on these other factors besides gold, getting those things that don't give you gold but actually do give you a big advantage, like a dragon, like Void Grubs, Rift Herald not so much, because you usually translate Rift Herald into gold by taking towers. Towers not so much, because towers just equal gold. Gold obviously equals gold. But XP and dragons and Void Grubs in particular are really nice because they don't count towards your team's bounty system for getting ahead of the other team. So it's like a tax write-off. It's like a tax-free way. Think of bounties that the other team gets as like a tax for you being ahead. It's like a wealth tax. And you want to avoid paying the wealth tax. You're a rich person and you can't be bothered with paying taxes. So don't try to overextend your gold lead. Instead, focus on capitalizing on getting the most XP as possible, because XP is giving you around 600 gold worth of stats per level, as well as access to other important ability points and extra damage through your abilities. So XP is really valuable, always has been, but is even more valuable in the new system because it doesn't get punished in objective bounties and things like that. So let's see what the whole thing says, though. We're overhauling the champion bounty system this patch. Our primary goal was to make the bounties more intuitive. We still believe in champions gaining a bounty on their head, so we're talking about the champion bounties first when they're doing well, but the way that it was being calculated didn't always line up with player expectations, so we rebuilt the underlying rules of champion bounties. Bounties are now purely based on gold. Don't worry, Pike and Gangplank players were ignoring special gold income from champion kits. This focus on gold means that a 000 Jinx can have a bounty on her head if she's earned enough gold through farming. A 0015 Janna will also have a bounty on her head, as she's earned plenty of money from champion combat. Chain ganking the top lane Jax will be worth less gold on average, as giving away gold for assist devalues him faster than if you were solo killed. So they're saying, so if you don't understand this, that when you get a kill solo, your team only gets 300 gold for getting the kill, less if that person's already died a lot, right, and they're worth less gold. But if you get an assist, this is a really big, important concept, actually, that people don't take advantage of. Big deal. You get an extra 150 gold for getting an assist. So now the kill becomes worth 450 gold instead of 300 gold. This is a big concept about League people don't understand. If you can even if you aren't needed to secure the kill, unless you really don't want to show yourself on the map or something, participating in a kill by doing the most basic throw a shield or throw an ability on someone is really important, or hit someone with one auto attack is really important, because it increases the gold that you get from the kill by like 50%. So that's really important. What they're saying here, though, is that if you chain gank somebody, like if you're constantly ganging up on somebody, because of the fact that you're always getting extra gold because you're generating assist gold, that's obviously a positive thing for you still, but it will be punished slightly harder by the bounty system, because the bounty system is purely based on that gold that you're getting, and you're getting more gold. So this is something people don't understand about League. Is it great if you can solo kill your lane opponent? Yes, but it's actually much more rewarding, 50% more rewarding, to kill your lane opponent with your jungler, even though it's easier. So you would almost think intuitively, right, that if something is harder, you get rewarded for it. But that's not how the game works, right? The game works by rewarding teamwork. So if you get the assist, you get the 150 gold. If multiple people get an assist, it just splits that 150 gold between the other people who got the assist. So let's say that you had one other person, instead of one other person getting the assist and you get 300 and they get 150, you have two other people get an assist. So they'd get 75 gold each. If you have three other people, they'd get 50 gold each, etc., right? Math gets hard if you have, all of your teammates getting an assist in a team fight. It'd be some weird number, but you get the point. So you're rewarded more, obviously, and you have been for getting assists. So that's something you should keep in mind when you're playing, because I think a lot of people don't understand that. Yes, that will be punished slightly harder by champion bounties based on gold, but obviously it's still worth it. As giving away gold for assists devalues him faster than if he were solo killed, Sion's 100 gold death won't put an extra 100 gold bounty on Fiora, who's just trying to protect her turret. We've tuned these changes for we've tuned these new champion bounties to generally decrease the total gold given and to favor the losing team more. I hate this because we've already talked about how good scaling champions are, and so I really don't like changes that help the losing team right now. I feel like the team that's getting ahead and winning, especially if it's an early game team comp that needs to get ahead to win, really need all the help that they can get. So I really don't like what Riot's doing here. And I think that they've been doing more and more of this because it's more fun when you feel like there's a chance to come back and win the game, and you feel like games aren't over and decided. But it has a lot of negative drawbacks, right? It makes scaling champions way, way, way too busted. And again, I talked about this before. it takes away your ability to dominate in solo queue, actually, because your biggest ability to control games in solo queue is through your lane. Because when you take a fight in solo queue and it's 1v1, you're 100% in control of the outcome of that situation. When you take a fight that's 2v1, you're only 50% in control of the outcome. And when you're stuck in a team fight late in the game, you are only 20% of the control over what's happening. So you want to do your best, get ahead in solo queue when you have the most control over the outcome of the situations that are unfolding, so that you can guarantee that your team is consistently getting a lead. So if you're dominating your lane 80-90% of your games, what's going to happen? Your win rate in solo queue is going to be very, very high, and you're going to be able to dominate and climb really easily if you're a better player than the rank that you're at. What ends up happening if games, let's just say that, like, no matter what you did in the laning phase was meaningless, and you just go into 20-minute plus mid-game, late-game team fighting, and nothing that you did in your lane matters because there's so much bounty gold and things like that, that it just doesn't matter if you get a lead or not. You just don't get rewarded for getting a lead. If you don't get rewarded for getting a lead because Riot wants to make games more interesting and more close and more 50-50 and more comebackable, then what's going to happen is games are always going to be determined in these team fights where you're only 20% of the equation. And so even if you're like leagues above the people that you're playing with, your skill expression in terms of your win rate is going to be a much smaller percentage. So for people who are very good at the game, it's frustrating when they take away the advantages that you get for being ahead. But I don't know. That's just my 2 cents on that one. Since individual kills and assists won't undo negative bounties as quickly, losing teams are going to give away less gold from fights, meaning their downside for taking risk will be lower and games will snowball more slowly. Yeah, this is just more of the same thing that they said. Same comments for me. While we play tested these new bounties internally for a couple of months, we'll be reading player feedback and reacting quickly if any parts of this new bounty system are misused. Fair enough. Or mistuned. That being said, right, that was kind of hyperbole. It's not like the game is at a point where your laning phase is meaningless. So don't think that I'm saying that. Scaling champions are way too good. I think laning phase does need to be more punishing and more impactful, but it's not meaningless. It still has a big impact, and it's still the area that you have the most control over and should focus the most on for improving in solo queue, especially because it's like, not only is it the most impactful, but it also plays out the most similarly game after game. Because, again, going back to what I was saying before, if you think about the variables that you have, let's say that you're playing the same character over and over again in your lane, and you're playing against the most popular champions, like we just talked about in AD carry, even in NA, 40% of the AD carries that are being picked are just Caitlyn or Jhin. In Korea, it's probably even higher. I don't know if it's the same 2 champions. We could look. But Korea usually has even better meta abuse and champion pool discipline. So I wonder if it's the same champions. It's actually Jhin and Ashe. But their top 2 champions right now, Jhin and Ashe, make up, instead of 40%, 48%. And their top 3 champions make up 68%. Of the 80 carries that you're playing against. Whereas in NA, our top 3 make up, this is about 40, 56. So, I can see what I'm talking about here. You're playing against the same 3 or 4 champions most games. And obviously bot lane has even more variance. Although bot lane usually has pretty higher pick rates than other roles, because usually there's... AD carry champions are very similar. So usually there's like a couple that are dominant that are standing out above the rest, and those are picked much more prominently. If you have less champions in the role, like if you've got 50 top laners and 25 AD carries, obviously, each AD carry champion's pick rate is just going to be higher naturally as a result. But anyways, the point is that if you're playing the same champion every game, and 90% of your games you're playing against the same 10 champions or something like that, those matchups are learnable. They'll repeat in very similar ways, and you can get consistently good at it. So not only do you have the most control over it, but it's also the most like static or consistent part of the game from game to game to game. Whereas you might find yourself, the way that you would approach a dragon fight or some skirmish in the river or some invade that's happening could play out in so many different ways with so many more combinations of champions than your lane does. So if you're playing top lane and you're always playing Fiora or something like that, and you're only playing most of your games versus 10 other top lane champions, it's very easy to get good at those 10 matchups and be able to dominate most of your games in lane, which consistently gives you a big lead in order to carry games. Whereas like if you look at, oh, well, I want to get good at skirmishing, the skirmishes are all over the place. They're in 20 different pieces of terrain, whereas your lane's one piece of terrain. They're in 20 different parts of the map with billions of combinations of different champions, whereas your lane is just your main champion versus like 10 other champions over and over again. So most consistent part of the game and most control over the outcome of the game. Anyways, back to the point. We were talking about champion bounties, so we got to go through this quicker, otherwise I'm actually going to fall asleep. Overview. We already did this, right? Where are we? Okay, we are at overview now. Champion bounties are now based on gold earned and lost, as opposed to kill death streaks and the relative amount of farm. Gold from champion-specific sources, Draven's Adoration, Twisted Fate's Loaded Dice, Pike, Gangplank, etc. never contribute to champion bounties. They're just an extra reward that those champions get as part of their kit, that's not going to get a bounty granted for it. Champion bounties are now accrued granularly. For example, it's now possible to have a bounty of +1 gold. Interesting. Bounties will not display on the scoreboard until they're worth at least 150 gold, and update in further increments of 50 gold. The shutdown announcement will display for any champion killed with at least 150 gold bounty on their head. I think they changed this in the next patch. Maybe they changed it when it was 100 or down to 100 or something. Positive bounties. A positive bounty is bonus gold given to a champion's killer when slain. Positive bounties are no longer based on kill streaks. Positive bounties are no longer based upon your minion and monster kills relative to the average minion and monster kills of the enemy team. Champions now accrue 1 bounty gold for every 4 gold earned from kills and assists. Oh, that's quite significant. So this is really interesting because one of the things I was going to say before, but it's quite nuanced and complicated, and I'm going to fall asleep, is that the reason why it's still worth it to camp that person or whatever, even if the bounty system is punishing that a little bit harder than before, is because the bounty system is only a small percentage return. So let's say that you die 10 times and give a bunch of gold over. Yes, that person that you die 10 times to is going to generate a bounty, but it's not going to be as big as the amount of gold that you gave them. Now, if you think about a strategy that like Boss had, the Boss before with his Inting Scion before these changes with the old bounty system, it's not that him dying that many times didn't give as much gold as he got back for the one shutdown. Like he was giving them much more than 1,000 gold when he got that 1,000 gold shutdown back. But there's two things. One, every assist resets one level. So if you were 0-6 and you had one assist, you were essentially at like 0-5. You're at like a 5 death streak in terms of the gold and XP or the gold that you're worth. So it's not as viable for other roles. So it worked very well in top lane because top lane is the lowest KDA role where you're an island and you're not roaming to help other lanes and you're very isolated. So it doesn't work if you go 0-10 and 10. It only works if you're devaluing yourself while not getting any kills or assists. And then, of course, if you get a kill, it completely resets you. So even if you were 0-6, if you get a kill, it takes you all the way back to being worth 300 gold again. And so there's a couple of things about that, right? Was really bad if you were 0-6 on, let's say, support, which actually happens like all the time. You could have a perfectly fine scoreline on support and be like 0-6 and 13 or 0-6 and 18 or 0-6 and 20 or something like that. If you take one kill, Well, actually, it wouldn't have mattered then, because if you had a decent amount of assists, you would have been worth the same amount anyways. But let's say you were 06 and 2 or 06 and 3 on support. If you accidentally KS at that point in the game, it was really, really bad because it reset your gold all the way up. So it wasn't that that strategy worked for him because he was recouping all of his gold through the one shutdown. It was that he was recouping a decent chunk of the gold through the shutdown. I don't know, let's say like 20, 30, 40%. But the main thing was that he was getting extra gold from his ability to farm 100% for free, get all of the CS, when normally his champion, especially like depending on how he was building it, would not have been able to lane in a normal standard way and get that much CS. And so the gold that he was generating for himself through farm was really, really good. Anyways, so it's interesting here. I like that they're expressing it in terms of 1 gold for every 4 gold, because this tells you the way you should think about this is that champions now accrue 25% gold bounty. So if I get 300 gold, or let's say I get 100 gold from kills and assist, that's going to generate a bounty of 25 gold for the enemy team, right? That's the way to think about this. So if I get 1,000 gold from kills and assists, I'm going to get a 250 gold bounty for getting that gold. And then same thing, potential bounty gold is reduced by 25% when gold is given away to killers and assisters on death. Okay. So that's interesting as well, because it also has a negative effect on your own bounty. And so I assume that means that you would have to catch up before you generated a bounty yourself. So that kind of doubles up on it, because if you get killed, you're increasing their bounty by 25%, but you're also decreasing your potential bounty by 25%. So in a way, you could kind of think about that as almost 50% of the gold is going to be swung back if you actually manage to come back to the point where you would have had a bounty and they wouldn't. Then if you actually manage to come back that hard and switch the state of the game like that, it's actually 50% of the gold that they're getting from kills and assists you can kind of recoup, which is kind of a crazy amount. While in a positive state, champions now accrue 1 bounty gold for every 20 gold earned from minions and monsters. So this is a much, much smaller amount, which is, and it's kind of been this way. Farming is a really good way to do this. Even before, when it was based on kill streaks and kills and deaths and stuff like that, obviously the risk is that the bounty that you generated from farming was tiny, and the bounty that you generated from getting kills and assists was quite large. So obviously farming was just much better, and they've kept that mechanic in the game. So that kind of incentivizes like farming, scaling, non-action, non-interaction, because you just have to get all the CS that you can, because generating, again, like it says, generating, let's put this into 100 again so that we can see the percentages. Generating 100 gold from CS, from minions and monsters, is going to generate only 5 bounty gold for the enemy team. But, if you got the same 100 gold from kills and assist, it's going to generate 25 compared to 5. So your risk and reward is like, if I give up 300 gold worth of CS to kill somebody and get 300 gold, the bounty that I've generated is 5 from the CS, whereas if I go for the kill and get the kill instead of the CS, the bounty I've generated is 25. So now I have a 5 times higher bounty on myself by generating the same amount of gold through kills and assists as I am from CSing. And that's kind of a piece of the game that's really frustrating if you understand it, because it just incentivizes farming and doing nothing. And that sucks too, because in the long term, to get better at the game, you have to fight people a lot, learn your champion's limits really well. And when you put systems like this into the game, where the correct way to play the game is usually very passively, and to play with only aggressively when you have very perfect information, and don't go for a kill even if it gives you 300 gold if you're going to lose like 200 gold worth of minions or something like that. That's really the way that you should play the game. But in order to learn the game properly, you have to like run at somebody and die 20 times in order to learn your champion's limits. And it's a really weird phenomenon where I think you really need to spend a lot of games running it down and just completely limit testing. And then once you've got it figured out and once you're competent, hit the brakes and start playing really passive and just chill and just focus on CSing and making the correct decisions and watching the minimap and waiting for all of the information on where everybody is. Then when you have perfect information on where everybody is and you're not giving up a lot of CS to go for a kill and you can, then you fight, and that's it. So, that's kind of a weird way that the game works like this. It'd be interesting to think about what the game would be like if the bounty gold that was generated from generating gold through CSing was the same as through getting kills. It'd be a completely different game. When a champion is shut down, all bounty gold is removed from the champion. As an exception, a champion with a bounty greater than 700 gold will carry over their remaining bounty into the next life. So this is the same as before. The first 100 bounty gold is not applied. For example, 400 gold worth of kills and assists will not give you a bounty, but the next 400 gold will set your bounty to plus 100 gold. This is weird. I don't really understand this. The first 100 bounty gold is not applied. So is this just at the beginning of the game, or is this just in general if you don't have a bounty, you can earn up to 100 bounty gold and it won't do anything? But if you earn 200 bounty gold, then it will set your bounty at 100. So this is just like the rule that they've put in places before, you wouldn't get a bounty at, let's say, 1 kill. Right? This is just that in a more complicated way for the new system. So it's just saying that you can get, 400 gold worth of kills and assist, or it could come from CS, but it'd take a lot of CS to get there, right? Because of how low the bounty is from CSing. It's just saying, you can have 100 bounty gold for free before we actually start counting the bounty against you. So very similar to the first kill not giving you a bounty. When active, objective bounties will now we're talking about objective bounties. Oh, they typoed. When active, objective bounties will now devalue positive bounties for the losing team. Oh, maybe they are talking about objective bounties. I can't even tell. When active, objective bounties will now devalue positive bounties for the losing team. So I guess this is saying that if you're behind in the objective bounty system, it's going to add a modifier to your champion bounties that is going to start at a 10% reduction and can reach even an 80% reduction in... Wow, that sounds really abusable. Like, what if you just get really far ahead in kills and personal champion bounties, like things that would give you just really good CS, really good gold, a lot of kills, and you fall really far behind in objectives that are counted with the objective bounty system, and then you're actually just winning the game. I wonder if it's good to give tier 1 towers now that don't mean anything. People will fight to defend a tier 1 top turret that's meaningless, in a 20-minute game scenario or something like that, or a bot tier 1 turret at 20-25 minutes, and obviously it's going to fall eventually for free. I wonder if it's kind of good to just give it, so that you're in the objective bounty system, you're not too far ahead, even though it's not giving them that much. But maybe the local gold from the turret is enough that you just don't like doing that. Negative bounties. A negative bounty is a baseline devaluation of a champion's kill gold. Unlike positive bounties, the reduced value is also factored into assist gold, which is unchanged. Negative bounties are no longer based upon death streaks. Negative bounties are no longer reset from earning a single kill. Negative bounties are no longer undone after 1 death per assist, or undo 1 death per assist. So this is good. You don't have to think about those thresholds anymore. You don't have to play around. Do I, as a top laner, do I not want to get any assists because it's going to, or not have an impact on the rest of my team because it's going to devalue. If I'm 0-3 and I go to some river skirmish and pick up 3 assists by doing next to nothing, it's actually going to hurt me because it's going to suddenly shoot me up from, being worth 150 gold back to 300 gold again, and I know I'm going to die another 3 times in this lane because my lane opponent's 3-0 and I'm 0-3 in a tough matchup or something. It takes all that crazy variables out of the game and just says, if you're behind, you're behind. If you're ahead, you're ahead. So, I do like that change for the most part. While in a negative state, base gold value is reduced by 1 for every 4 gold given to killers and assisters on death. While in a negative state, base gold value is increased by 1 for every 4 gold earned from kills and assists. Shutdown gold is applied to negative bounties. While in a negative state, base gold value is increased by 1 for every 10 gold earned from minions. So let me think about that. So I was going to say these are probably just going to all be mirrors of these ones up here, but actually the CS amount is different, and it's weirdly different because, so let me think. It's actually like worse. Like you get more of a bounty. It's so weird actually. You get more of a bounty from CSing while you're behind than you do from CSing while you're ahead, which is kind of weird to me why it wouldn't just be the same. But it's not really going to change the way that you're going to do anything. It's just weird that they decided to make that different. The first 50 negative bounty gold is not applied. Oh, so this is, I was misunderstanding about the negative bounty. It's not preventing a bounty from spawning. The negative bounty is reducing your 300 gold that you give. The negative bounty is like just taking you down from 300 because it's replacing, as they said, obviously, like the gold on death modifier that came from dying a certain amount of times in a row before. So it would just be applied, every time that you die. So as to the question of like, does it reset, when you generate a bounty? It's not resetting when you generate a bounty. It's not resetting unless you get ahead in gold again. It's just making you worth less gold. So that's fine. The first 50 negative bounty gold is not applied. That's actually kind of, well, that's actually kind of interesting because it didn't used to work like that. So before on the positive bounty, sure, if you had 1 kill, maybe you were like 1-0-1, you had no bounty. If you were 1-0, you had no bounty. So that's why it started at like 100 or 100 bounty gold in this system. But that never was the case with the negative one. If you were 0-1, you were worth less gold than if you were 0-0. So that's kind of interesting. The first negative 50 does not count. For example, 300 gold death will set your base kill gold to -25 instead of 75. So this is actually good because one of the bad things I was talking about with these changes is you want laning phase to be impactful. You don't want it to be, not punishing. And one of the things they do to balance this out a little bit, which is sneaky little minor change, is that your first death takes you, instead of from 300 to 225 gold, your first death, you're still worth 275 gold. So if you go 0-2, there's an extra 50 gold in it for the enemy lane opponent, as compared to before when you actually would have been worth 75 gold less. So there's 50 gold swing here. So that's actually a little bit of a nice change if you're dominating lane and kill somebody twice. Then they got the objective bounties. In addition to champion bounties, we're also changing objective bounties in this patch. While the champion bounty changes were large in scope, this update is mostly under the hood cleanup aimed at making objective bounties turn on and off at more appropriate times. Oh, yeah. I had probably just forgotten about this. I mentioned earlier that I thought everything was based on gold, but it's just the champion bounties. I forgot. Yeah, they actually did a good thing, which is they added void grubs to the objective bounties. So we were talking before about how OP XP is. XP is still really OP, and we'll talk about that because here are the changes and I see them. We were talking about grubs, dragons, and XP. And I was saying those things are OP because they don't give you gold. Well, the objective bounty is not only based on gold, it does still incorporate dragons, and now it incorporates grubs, still leaving XP very good. But it did incorporate XP. Okay, so anyways, let's just see, because I forget. It's been a long time since I cover these changes. That's why it's good to go through them again. Void grubs now contribute to the team-wide objective bounties. Experience differences contribute 40% less. So this is a really big change because XP was already really strong in the previous system because it was giving you a lot of value and not really doing a whole lot for team objective bounties. But now it's contributing 40% less. And now that void grubs and dragons and turrets and all these things contribute, XP contributing 40% less is really big. And then turret and drake differences are slightly more likely to contribute. So void grubs went from not contributing at all, being very strong because of that, to now contributing as an objective. Dragons and turrets are contributing more than before, but the one thing that's contributing less, which is good, is XP. Even gold differences contribute 25% more. So that's big nerf again to gold in terms of your individual champion bounties and your team bounty. Big buff to XP impacting your champion bounty. Well, it doesn't have any effect on your champion bounty, but XP affecting objective bounties. So that's why I was, talking about how important XP was in this patch. Objective bounties will deactivate more quickly when the losing team makes a comeback. Objective bounties are ending soon. Timer from 60 seconds to 30 seconds. Objective bounties are decreased by 20 to 40% in situations where the losing team is already coming back. Baron Nashor base objective bounty 500 to 300 gold. And again, I think that they actually did a pretty good job here with you don't want to just make it, so objective bounties are stronger or something like that. So they take it back. They dial it back if the team's already starting to come back. We don't know exactly what that means, but I can imagine if you're stringing multiple things together, turret takes and that sort of thing, it's going to deactivate more quickly. It's going to reduce the amount of gold you're getting when you're snowballing those objectives back to back and you're coming back and gold really quickly. And the Baron, bounty gold is down. Since that's likely to be a significant factor in you winning the game anyway. So I think they did a good job with adding in some kind of counterbalance changes in there as well. And then they did a Teemo visual update, and then we're going to look at the systems updates, mostly again back to the 80 carry itemization changes that happened, because obviously Collector, in 1420, Yun Tal and Collector got a little bit wild. Sork shoes, they nerfed the magic penetration by 3. That sucks. Yeah, that just kind of sucks. Blade of the Rune King. Sork shoes are strong, but I don't think they needed to do that. That just feels bad. Especially after what they did to Ludens and stuff like that. Mages have been kind of screwed for years, and then they felt good for maybe a couple of months or something like that. Now, Ludens and what was it? Ludens, Storm Surge, and Sork boots are all nerfed, so that must feel really fun. So I wonder what that did. Can actually look, I wasn't paying much attention to it, but probably those things in combination with each other. That's why it's sometimes good, like I said, it'd be interesting to look at multiple patches at once. I wonder if that contributed to a downfall in certain champions like LeBlanc. Nah, her win rate since 1420 is relatively unchanged, I would say. Her pick rate's gone down, though. Probably have to look at more champions than just LeBlanc, but, be curious about champions that build those items. What happened to, Orianna? Orianna was actually building those items and had been doing quite well. Yeah, she's building a lot of these nerfed items. Let's see what happened to her. Almost nothing. I'm really surprised that it didn't do a whole lot to them. But probably still feels bad. If you're a mid laner, even if it didn't change your win rate or pick rate a whole lot, just complain about it. Still feels bad. Blade of the Ruined King, miss edge 10% melee, 6% range to 8% melee, so down 2%, and 5% ranged, so down 1% for range of the target's current HP. That is, I think that's kind of stupid. The reason why I think it's stupid is I actually did a lot of math. I think we talked about it when we were looking at Kraken Slayer. We did a video talking about, I was really diving into like AD carry attack speed versus attack damage efficiency and that sort of thing. And as part of that, I was just looking into, well, obviously, you know, that's a piece of it, but it's not just the amount of attack damage and attack speed you're getting. The main thing always with items is how much value are you getting from actives or passives. And one of the reasons why people build Kraken Slayer like almost every game, or at least they did before, is because you just get so much more damage from its passive than all these other items. And I think that Borg had a break-even point if like the average person on the enemy team had like, it was not a nice number. It's like the average person on the enemy team had to have like 2,600 HP or something like that. Maybe it was 2,000, maybe it was 2,800. But that's a rough number because like most, especially if you're building at first item, sure, they may have one tank with 3,000 HP, but if they've got a bunch of squishy champions on their team too, the average is not going to be even at the break-even point with Kraken Slayer. So I genuinely don't think Blade of the Ruined King, I mean, it is an on-hit item, so obviously if you're going on-hit, if you're going things like Runeans, if you're going Rage Blade and stuff like that, Blade of the Ruined King becomes better later when you're combining it with those things. Well, Kraken Slayer's on-hit too, though. So I just genuinely think that in a lot of situations, Kraken, or even Statikk Shiv back then, was just better than Blade of the Ruined King. And people were just kind of building the wrong item. So I think nerfing it seems really dumb, especially in the face of like on-hit AD carries are not in a good spot, I don't think, because they just, and we saw this in the 1420 notes, they just way over buffed Collector and Yun Tal. So, and they're probably gonna, I'm wondering if Yun Tal is actually broken between 1420 and 1421, or if the change to Yun Tal in 1422 is also a buff, because they don't, you know, they show whether the champion changes or buffs, but I don't know whether this is a buff or they're trying to nerf it. So I don't quite know yet if in this patch Yun Tal was broken, or if they buff Yun Tal again in 1422, and then that's when Yun Tal becomes really good. But either way, like if you've got Kraken or you know, Kraken Slayer already a really good option. You've just buffed Collector like a crazy amount, and Yun Tal is looking pretty good. On-hit AD carries are not in a good spot. I don't know why you would need to hit on-hit AD carries with Blade of the Ruined King at all. And then for like the melee champions building it, like they just don't have to do with any of these things. So nerfing it for like whatever melee users want to go Blade of the Ruined King first also just doesn't really make any sense to me. So that's just kind of dumb. Recommended runes. Oh, they just changed some recommended runes for certain champions. Don't care. Oh, they buffed lethal tempo so that the attack speed is up by 1%. Oh, for melee champions only. It's such a weird change too, because pretty much any champion that's going Blade of the Ruined King as a melee champion is also going to take lethal tempo, and so we're like, on-hit melee champions are too strong, so we're nerfing Blade of the Ruined King, but also we've just made them too weak, so now we're buffing lethal tempo for melee champions. It's just the weirdest thing. Like, I get that there's some nuances and they don't perfectly overlap, but like, anyways, just a little bit weird. Yeah, that's just so weird. They just didn't need to do any of that. Okay, so let's see what they did with systems. This should be a lot easier because we don't have the bounties. Actually, they kept working on it. Never mind. But it's fine. Okay, so they did some stuff with minions, barrier, and bounty clarity, and then some items and smite and stuff like that. The Yun Tal change will tell us if they buffed Yun Tal on this patch, this is a patch that really pushed Yun Tal over the edge. If they nerfed it, it's already been good through what we've been going through. So the bounty stuff is pretty simple. They just decided to make bounties show up after 100 gold instead of 150, so I had already heard this. And then I remember this change. This is really big. They changed the side lane minion movement speed so that minions gain decaying bonus movement speed, 120 movement speed for the first 14 minutes of the game, 120 to 0 movement speed scaling with game time for the first 14 minutes. And we'll read this blurb so that it's easier to understand. But this change is kind of looks like a small change, but this is a really big change. Generally speaking, minions and minion waves are so fundamental to like how everything happens in League that anytime they really change the way that minion waves function, and they've barely ever done it with League, but anytime they change the way that it functions, it's going to drastically change the way that supports roam and mid laners roam, and when you should be ganking and when you can recall and when you can't. So it really changes the whole game. It's actually really annoying. I think it's the type of thing that they shouldn't change, to be honest with you. And I know that sounds drastic because League is a game with a lot of change, and they've basically changed everything. League is the video game equivalent of a Ship of Theseus, where, is it still the same game if we've changed every component of the game after 15 years? But there have to be some things that remain core to the game. And I think the way minions work should probably just be one of them. And I think we've talked about before too how like complicated the game is to learn. Imagine you're learning the game and you're just starting to get a grasp on how the minion waves are moving and affecting everything, and then they just completely change it. It's so dumb. So they started doing this last year. Okay, so they mentioned it, so we'll read the paragraph because this is what I was going to say. The one other change that they made to it was last year they made mid and side lane minion waves crash or meet in the middle at the exact same time. Now, that doesn't really make sense because if you think about if the minions had all the same movement speed, they would get to mid lane first because mid lane is straight. If you learned in geometry or whatever, right? Like if you take a straight diagonal line, a straight line is going to be a lot quicker than going in like some arbitrary curved line, of course, or like a straight line is also going to be quicker than a diagonal line. So like if you look at a square, like the sides of one of the square is going to be shorter than going diagonally across the square. Well, Summoner's Rift is basically a square, and mid lane is a straight line across the square, and the other ones are like curving thingies, and so they're just going to be longer if the minions had the same movement speed. So it used to be that all the minions had the same movement speed, and then last year they changed it, and I think this is one of the first times they've messed with the way that minions move like this before. They changed it so that rather than the mid wave getting there first, the mid lane minions would arrive at the same time as the side lane minions. And that is such a crazy change because mid lane as a role fundamentally before that change, maybe even after, but mid lane is fundamentally about clearing your wave quickly with a control mage style champion and then moving with your priority to ward, to invade with your jungler, or to gank bot lane or something like this, right? You could gank top lane too, but let's be honest, nobody cares about top lane. So that was the way that mid lane as a role had its identity. And then when they made this change, you have to understand, so why is that? Not only because mid lane is a central role and their champions generally have a lot of wave clear and stuff like that, although that's more of a result of mid lane being a central role than anything else. It's not just that mid lane is a centralized role, it's also that the minions arrive first there. So if you cleared, let's say you wanted to do the same thing but in bot lane or in top lane. If you played a mage bot lane and you instantly cleared the wave and then tried to go mid, like last year, because your wave got there later than the mid wave, by the time you got to mid, the wave would already be gone mid, or like they'd be finishing it off and then leaving, not contesting anymore. Whereas if you cleared your wave mid, you could be bought while their wave was still alive, right? Because their wave got there later. So that was a really big aspect of how the game functioned, is that mid laners' role and identity and the champions that were being picked there, the champions that were being picked in mid and the champions that were being picked in bot, were all based around the fact that mid lane could clear their wave first and then move before any other role. That was a huge advantage that was unique to mid lane, and then they just took it away arbitrarily and made it so the minions just meet at the same time. Is it any surprise then that the meta starts shifting in mid lane away from control mage champions who are also having itemization issues, like we don't have enough good control mage items. They've worked on that a little bit, although it looks like they just nerfed a bunch of them, but maybe it didn't matter too much. Maybe they weren't too big of nerfs. So these champions were having itemization issues, and they're getting outdated because a lot of the control mages are pretty straightforward, simple, outdated champions. I guess you have like what is Aurora's like a new control mage, but you have a lot of outdated control mages, I would say. So now all of a sudden you've got outdated champions, itemization issues in mid lane. We're talking about like a year ago. And now all of a sudden the core identity to the role, which is that you can clear your wave because your minion wave arrives first and roam and impact another lane on that minion wave that they're having, on that same minion wave. Now that whole aspect is gone with this one change arbitrarily. So is it any wonder then that like a lot of newer champions, a lot of different champions in mid lane, not a lot of non-control mages and stuff like that, can come into the meta in mid lane? 80 carries, right? We're coming into mid lane. Why are 80 carries coming into mid lane? Because it doesn't matter that you don't have wave clear as an 80 carry compared to a control mage, because there is no roaming opportunity to bot lane anymore from mid because the minions are meeting at the same time. So even if you clear slower than your opponent, they're not often able to find very much off of that window as they used to be able to. So that's a huge problem. So one of the reasons why 80 carries came mid, yes, it was because there were certain 80 carry champions that love levels, but it was more than that, right? It was a combination of things. And actually the minion wave change contributed to 80 carries coming mid and mages being more viable bot, because if you got an 80 carry mid, then you can just put a mage bot if you want to, keep your damage composition similar, and things like that. And so you just stick the 80 carry mid and then stick the mage bot. Obviously, the idea that 80 carries need a support to babysit them is a bit antiquated. I think players are good enough now that they can pilot a weak 80 carry champion through the early game without needing their support in order to survive, which is why supports, unlike in Season 1 and Season 2 and stuff like that, when your job was literally to babysit your 80 carry because they would die the second you left, even, in like really high elo, that's only the way the game works at like silver now. In higher elo, supports are roaming all the time because their 80 carry is capable of surviving sometimes by themselves. So that's why mages were more open to going to bot and 80 carries were more open to going to mid, or one of the big reasons that probably people don't think about or don't know. So these minion changes are crazy impactful to the game. So last year we made the mid and side lane minions crash at the same time, or meet in the middle at the same exact time. I wouldn't call it crash. I think this is a dumb word to use because usually when you think of waves crashing, you're talking about crashing it into the turret. So I think this is poor word choice from Riot. Like, it's fine. It's not that big of a deal. But I think poor word choice because of the terminology. Like, it seems like the person writing the patch notes, it's a small thing, but it bothers me because it seems like the person writing the patch notes doesn't really understand like the terminology at a high level. But anyways, the waves meet each other in mid lane at the exact same time as the side lanes, so that if a mid laner cleared their wave and then roamed, the side laners had likely cleared their wave as well. We're walking this change back by about half. They should have just undid the whole thing. Now they'll still meet at the same time very early on, but that will gradually desync over time. giving more and more time for mid laners to roam into side lanes to create action. We're lowering this bonus with game time in order to make super early lanes still relatively protected, but make post 6 roams easier and easier. So the way that this works when we go back and read these numbers is that essentially at 0 minutes into the game, it's the same, no change. The minion wave in mid is going to meet at the same time as the minion wave in bot. But the closer you get from 0 minutes to 14 minutes, at 14 minutes, the mid lane wave will meet much faster than the bot lane wave. And so it's like the closer you are to 14 minutes, the closer you are to a year and a half ago when mid lane actually had that advantage. So what will happen as a result of this is a lot of reversal of some of the stuff that was happening before, but like they said, about halfway, because as a mid laner, I think this is dumb I think it overcomplicates the game for the minion speed to be changing in a weird way like that. I think that really overcomplicates things. I've actually started to notice this too, I think. But anyways, as a support, because I'll be roaming to mid, and it feels different every single minute I'm roaming to mid. That's what's been going on. It's because the minions are walking at a different speed every single time I roam mid. It's so confusing. It's just one of these things that overcomplicates the basics of the game, right? Like, you want the game, and League in general for a MOBA actually does a pretty good job of having a simple game at its basics, but then obviously it's very complex, hard to master, a lot going on. But at its basics, at its core, it's generally pretty straightforward and simple compared to other MOBAs. So it becomes more accessible. Doing stuff like this to the basic fundamentals of the game that they really shouldn't be touching at all, in my opinion, again, is really bad. Because even if the change is good, because it moves us back towards what I think was healthy for mid lane, where mid lane had its identity as a role centered around being able to clear waves and roam, even though I like that they're walking back some of that change, overcomplicating the basics of the game and the process, making it feel weird every time you roam as support because you're trying to roam with the minion wave when the minion wave gets to mid, so that their mid laner has to be there to catch that wave and you're there to contest them when they're there for it. And as Braum specifically, most of my roams in mid are straight through mid from behind my mid laner, because I'm just gonna W from out of, I'll walk out of vision and then W forward to a minion rather than trying to gank from the side lane bush. And so it's really important to me, the timing of the minions, and it feels really weird now because every single minion wave is different. It's really annoying for support, really annoying for junglers, really annoying for mid laners, just because it overcomplicates things. So it would have been a better change. It's a good change. It's in the right direction, but it would have been a better change to keep the game simpler and to actually be more of a change in a positive direction if they had just gotten rid of this shenanigans in the first place. What will happen as a result is that AD carries will still be good mid, but, well, they'll be weaker than they were before because they'll be good mid in the first beginning part of the game, but then as you get closer and closer to 14 minutes or whatever, and plus, because it'll stay the same after 14 minutes, they will become weaker because they won't be able to exploit the same roaming that mages can in mid lane. So that is nice. Maybe one of the reasons why, even though those item nerfs happen to control mages, maybe those item nerfs were preemptive because of this change, returning control mages to prominence. And maybe one of the reasons why we've actually seen a very neutral effect on their win rate is because this minion change right here helped control mages a lot in mid lane, but the item nerfs balanced it out or something like that. So it changed the champions that were being played in mid lane maybe back to more control mages that could clear, or more wave clear oriented champions, and maybe away from some marksmen in mid lane. But didn't overpower them in the process. So that's a rare, maybe accidental, because they actually just pulled the trigger on these mid lane item nerfs or whatever. Like, this was like 2 patches before, and they just said it was completely unrelated. So maybe Riot accidentally stumbled into a really good balance change here, where they actually managed to toe the line here without really creating much of a problem. But yeah, I think they shouldn't mess with minion movement speed, and they should have just reverted the change. That would have been better. And they've overcomplicated things yet again. But I do like the direction the change is going in, and it'll just undo like we talked about before. So roaming will be more important. It will be weird, but mid laners will have to try to time their roams more later roams instead of early roams. So the later it gets, the easier it's going to be for you to roam. And so you're going to want to think about that. Like, I'm not trying to roam as a mid laner, level 1 through 6, but then at 6 or later, then I'm looking to roam, like they said. So that's going to be a weird dynamic again that overcomplicates things, because I think roaming should be just as effective for mid laners. I mean, you have access to less abilities, but it should be basically just as effective, at level 3 if you find a good opportunity to roam and the bot lane's pushed up and you're able to clear your wave, as it is at level 6. It should be the same, basically. So I don't think that that's necessarily a good thing. That they didn't go further and that they overcomplicated the game, but it's fine. And then, like I said, marksmen will be fine in the beginning, but then they will be worse overall than they were before in mid lane, because they will be worse at wave clearing once mid laners have more opportunity to roam. And then what did they do for the other system changes in this patch in 14.22? That would explain, though, for sure why it feels weird every time I'm walking mid lane and the minions keep walking at a different speed every time I go. So, that's good to know. Youmuu's Ghostblade. So it looks like a lot of lethality items, and then Yun Tal is going to be the interesting one. Oh, and then they did a lot to Statikk Shiv here. Okay. So Youmuu's attack damage down 5, movement speed up 4%. That's probably a good trade-off. I mean, yeah, that's probably good. It looks like they changed the recipe a little bit. Serrated Dirk to Serrated Dirk, Retrix to Retrix, Pickaxe to Longsword. I think this is a worse build path, because they didn't change the total gold cost. Longsword's easier to buy, but then it means that you're sitting on 675 gold instead of having Pickaxe. And so in a lot of situations, the Longsword is worse. So that's kind of annoying, actually. They should have just not messed with the recipe. I guess they had to. Oh, they had to, because the attack damage went down by 5. Otherwise, you might, if it was still Pickaxe, you might end up with like 5 more attack damage, and then when you complete the item, you lose 5 attack damage. Riot doesn't do that. Again, another unwritten rule. They don't want to make the game too complicated. There's stuff like that in the game anyways, though. There's a lot of, component items like Lost Chapter. You finish, your item, and then that Lost Chapter passive goes away and that sort of thing. It's a little bit confusing. Opportunity. Attack damage up by 5, movement speed down. Yeah, this is fine. And then the preparation lethality, it's up 1. I guess this is like melee and ranged. And then the recipe changed as well. So they changed this, I'm assuming. Oh, they gave it a pickaxe. Oh, they changed a lot. Okay, so it went from Serrated Dirk to Serrated Dirk, and then Retrix is gone because it lost the movement speed. And then this was 925 gold, feels really bad. Instead of sitting on 925 gold, you're getting the pickaxe and a longsword. So this is like, I feel like the change because of the build path is a lot nicer for opportunity. But essentially what they're doing here is they're saying, if you build opportunity, you don't get any movement speed. But because if you're choosing to build Youmuu's, you're already wanting movement speed in the active of Youmuu's. Here's some. Does the active of Youmuu's actually still give active movement speed anymore? I don't know that that's even true. But they're basically saying if you build Youmuu's, you want movement speed anyway, so let's put all of the lethality movement speed into Youmuu's. Let's look up Youmuu's Ghostblade really quickly. Should probably know this. No. Oh, yeah. Active. Gain 20% or 15% bonus movement speed, depending on if you're melee or range. And ghosting, which means you can move through units like minions for 6 seconds. Yeah. So it's still the same thing. Okay, just making sure. Support player here, by the way. I don't know what's going on with the Yomos. So yeah, I think that just makes a lot of sense. That was going to be my whole take, so I needed to make sure that that take wasn't completely out of nowhere if they had changed Yomos to being just a passive or something. I don't know why I thought Yomos might be just a passive now. But anyways, yeah, so if you're building Yomos, you obviously want the movement speed anyways, because it's a superior movement speed item. So just throw all of the movement speed into Yomos, and people who want movement speed are more happy, and give a little bit more damage to people who want opportunity, and the people who want opportunity and less movement speed are happy with that. So I think that's a fine change, and relatively minor changes, so that's fine. Statikk Shiv. Okay, so this was interesting. So they took the cost down by 200 on Statikk Shiv. So there was another Statikk Shiv change here in the first one where they reduced the attack speed by 5%, but I just think that wasn't that big of a deal. I thought it was a bigger deal because people were building it less, but I think people were just building it less because like a lot of champions that would have built Statikk Shiv are just going to go Collector or Yun Tal with how they were. Okay, so 200 gold off the cost. That's really nice. Attack damage down by 5 though, and attack speed down to 30%. So now we went from 40% down to 30%. Wait, this is weird. They didn't give it 5% attack speed back. So they wrote this change. So it should have been 35% to 30% here, but they're writing it as 40% to 30%, like they're writing it from the old numbers. So that's weird that they wrote it like that. So it actually only lost 10% attack speed across these 3 patches in total. Weird that they wrote it like that. That's just a mistake. They should have put 35 to 30. But anyways, so, 200 gold off, you lose 5 attack damage, you lose 5% more attack speed if you're considering the previous change, or you could say this change plus this change. Well, let's just read it this way, as if we're ignoring this change, because that's the way they've written it. 200 gold off, minus 10% attack speed, minus 5 attack damage. I mean, that definitely feels bad, right? Again, we talked about Collector was 450 gold cheaper. Now, that was just bonkers, but 450 gold cheaper, and you lost like 5 attack damage, and that was it. Oh, you lost 10 attack damage, okay. But here you're losing 10% attack speed and 5 attack damage, and you're only getting 200 gold off. So that's just way worse. Maybe they do something else here that buffs it. Your first 3 attacks within 8 seconds fire chain lightning on hit, hitting up to 5 targets, including the attack target, for 60 magic damage. Increase to 85 for minions and monsters. 25 to 10-second cooldown, levels 7 through 12. Oh, okay, so they're just saying that they're reworking Statikk Shiv in general. So I have no comparison, so I have no idea if this is a buff or a nerf. Remade, scoring a takedown resets the cooldown on Electrospark. Well, what was the item before? I have no comparison whatsoever in the patch notes of what the item was before. Wow, I typed that really bad. This is the right Statikk Shiv, right? Okay. Can we see? I mean, they're not going to say here either. 1420. Oh, this one's outdated. Wow, people are just not updating this one at all anymore, huh? Okay, we got to go to the League Wiki. This one. There's a new League Wiki. I got to remember that. That's going to be really annoying that all the old stuff's coming up on Google. All the old links. I can't even type the item's name. It is what it is. Statikk Shiv. Wait, why didn't they call it Statikk Shiv? That would have been good because it's a stacking item. Okay, let's see. So surely we can see the change, right? Okay, here they have the old effect. Old effect. Upon killing a minion or monster. Okay, so the biggest change is that it's your next 3 attacks on hit deal 60 bonus magic damage rather than upon killing a minion or monster. So this was a really annoying, weird, niche thing. So now that's gone. Increase to 85 against non-champions. So this works against non-champions too. So like once it's off of cooldown, you're going to have extra bonus magic damage, but you'll lose it to the minions if you have to be last hitting or just hitting minions in general. But it will help you clear faster, and then it will bounce to the closest target within 500 units, repeating from the new target to strike up to 5 targets. And then this is a cooldown. So it's going to be less damage because it can only strike 5 targets. This one struck 6 targets. But that doesn't matter most of the time, because if you have a normal minion wave with 6 minions, the minion you're hitting plus the other 5 minions would be 6. This would only matter if you're on it being 6 targets instead of 5 would only matter if you're on a cannon wave, although that does matter sometimes, right? And it is every 1 in 3 waves. And then the other thing is that it used to deal 120 magic damage, but now it would be, if you're just clearing minion waves, it's only dealing 85 magic damage to all of them. And then, but the nice thing is that if you're hitting a champion 3 times, you're just going to have 60 bonus magic damage on each auto attack, which is really nice and a lot more damage. And then it will chain that to other targets. So that is quite nice, I think, right? Except you'd need to auto them twice to get the same amount of damage you would have gotten from hitting them once with the old static effect. And then how did the cooldown work? So now the cooldown is 25 to 10 seconds based on level. And it's got some weird level breaking points. It's not every level. It's 1, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Oh, that makes sense, though, actually, because they're basically... So it has its base at 25, but then you're not likely to buy the item until around level 8. They've been doing this more and more. I think it's actually kind of confusing, because if you do manage to buy the item early, like at a level 6 or level 7 or a level 8, it's less rewarding, because you don't get any bonus for being that level. But they've been doing this with a change to a lot of items with the cooldown. I think it's just a really confusing system when it only relies on certain level points instead of at every level. But anyway, so level 1, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So that's not too bad. It's not like you have to be, you look at this without hovering over this and you're like, oh, I have to get to level 18 for it to be 10. But it's actually, immediately dropping to 22 by the time you're most likely buying it at level 8 anyways. So it really should read more like, 22 to 10, but at level, 8, which is immediately. So it's really like 22 to 10, up to level 12 instead of level 18. So that's a big difference, obviously, in the way that this works. Okay, so that's the cooldown. The old one, scoring a takedown against a champion within 3 seconds of damaging them resets the cooldown entirely. Oh, that's the new effect. Scoring a takedown against a champion unleashes the lightning shock at the location of their death, which chains to the closest target within 650 units, repeating from the new one to strike up to 186 targets, dealing 270 magic damage to each. This is a big change, obviously, with the item. Let me scroll down. I'm kind of in the way of this a little bit. It's a big change, obviously. I think that the cost being reduced helps a lot. But like I said, I really think that losing 5 attack damage and another 5% attack speed, or if you think about the previous change, it lost 10% 5% attack speed and 5 attack damage for 200 gold. I think that in and of itself is a nerf. And then the way that I read the active or the passive, or passive, I guess, right? I read the passive as a nerf. And the reason for that is because if you're in a team fight and you get even one takedown, even in a losing fight, you get even one takedown, which can even be an assist. A takedown's a killer assist against an enemy champion. You're now dealing 270 magic damage, whereas here you're only dealing 120. This could bounce to 186 targets. So this could hit the entire enemy team in a team fight. Whereas, like, this new one is only dealing 120 magic damage. And that's to... Let's see, hold on. I'm getting a little bit lost in the sauce. Okay, so you're dealing 60 bonus magic damage 3 times. So you do, like, 180 damage. And then you've got, like, a pretty long cooldown. Like, in a lot of early fights, level 8, level 9, you're only getting this off once a team fight. Unless you get a takedown. Oh, okay, so hold on. So it's like... Let me figure this out. There's a break-even point here. So if you just got one takedown, 270 magic damage, even to just one person when you got that takedown, is going to be way better than 180 bonus magic damage by hitting somebody 3 times. But if you get a takedown here, you're going to get that 180 bonus magic damage again. So that would be 180 plus 180 would be 360. So if you got a takedown, so if you auto 3 times with this, and then you get a takedown, and then you auto 3 times with this is going to be more damage than if you got a takedown which chained lightning to deal damage to one enemy champion. But if you're dealing damage to multiple enemy champions with the chain lightning, then it's worse, because if you even hit 2 people, now you'd have to be getting multiple takedowns with the new passive in order to make up for the damage. So that's a problem. I think that's a big problem. So I really do read this as a nerf. I know it's quite a complicated change, but I basically look at it and I'm like, okay, it's nice that you get a little bit of bonus damage on hit, and it's not such a weird killing minions thing, or dependent on killing minions or killing enemy champion. But essentially, you're just going to be doing less damage. The only situation in which you wouldn't be doing less damage is if you got one takedown, but you only change your lightning to one person. But honestly, a lot of times you are going to get like 3 or 4 man chain lightnings, even 2 man, and then it's just the old one was just better. And like I said, the gold reduction that you got here, it doesn't even make up for the stat reduction you got in attack speed and attack damage. And on top of that, you're competing with other items like Collector, which are way, way buffed, like 450 gold down, and for only 5 attack or 10 attack damage taken away. So, that's not good. Okay, so let's see what they did to Yun Tal. So the real question here, for context of what's been going on in these patches I missed, and was mostly gone for not playing a lot, is did Yun Tal become busted with the first buff, or did they buff it again and then it really took off? Or was it busted with the first one and then this is a nerf? Let's see. So it sounds like this. It sounds like this one made it broken, because they said that they're remaking Yun Tal here. We're remaking it into the early game auto attack crit item we promised. Yun Tal is meant to be purchased in the first slot, but as a piece of late game crit AD carry build, it starts out weaker than its competitors Essence Reaver and Collector before scaling and surpassing them in teamfight DPS. As with any significantly updated system, we'll be measuring both its user base and performance on those users to ensure it has a home. So basically, they're saying that ever since they introduced Yun Tal, it's just been a dead item. Everyone knows that it's just very similar to Infinity Edge, but just worse. And so no one would ever build it, unless maybe you could build it after Infinity Edge as like a fourth, fifth, or a sixth item, which you're very rarely getting to anyways on certain champions. Probably not anyways. Probably better going a defensive item or something else. And obviously, like a lot of times on AD carry, you're going like a, an LDR or something like that as a fourth item. And then you have like, you're going to go a defensive item or you're going to go Yun Tal. And it's like you already have enough damage. If you're 4 items in, you've got IE and you've got LDR or Immortal Reminder or something. Do you really need Yun Tal? Or do you actually need and benefit way more from survivability? So it just had no place before. But it did already get a pretty decent buff, although nothing crazy. But it did get 250 gold off, but lost 5 attack damage and 10 serrated edge damage, which I think was a buff. I don't really know a whole lot about the serrated damage because it was just bad to begin with. So I don't know how big of a deal 10 was. Total gold cost, they're increasing the cost by 50 in this patch. The recipe is changing, but I don't really care. We'll come back to that later. Attack damage is down by 10. So cost up by 50, attack damage down by 10, critical strike removed. But now it's got 25% attack speed. How can it be the crit item that they promised when it doesn't have crit? Am I missing something? Oh, okay, yeah, here. They completely remade the passive. The passive gives crit. That's interesting. 25% attack speed, serrated edge just removed. So that's interesting too, because this nerf here with the serrated edge damage is just gone because they've removed that entirely. Practice makes lethal. On attack, permanently gain 0.2% critical chance up to 25%. That is really interesting. So you like auto attack someone and permanently gain 0.2% critical chance. Let me scroll here so we can... the thing's so long we can't even see. I guess I'll just put my wall half off the screen. How about that for now? Interesting. And then you gain 25% crit chance. So it has to scale, but you'll get 25% crit chance, which they removed. But you get 25% crit or attack speed for free. So okay, so you're paying 50 more gold for plus 25% attack speed minus 10 AD. But you don't get the 25% crit chance until later and you've scaled it. But that's fine because the crit chance is useless early anyways. So the genius of the item is that you don't care about having the crit until you're going to go buy IE anyways. So the genius is that it doesn't matter that you don't have it stacked when you have no attack damage anyways. You're getting AD and attack speed out of building the item, but then you get the critical strike chance that you wanted when you actually need it, when you're about to go into your second crit item or into IE. So that's really interesting. This is a really well-designed thing so far. It's also got another passive, since this is more of a stat line, that called Flurry. On attacking an enemy champion, gain 30% attack speed for 4 seconds, 40-second cooldown, reduced by 1 second every time you get an auto attack in, and reduced by 2 seconds if you critically strike them. So that's also nice. So you're also going to get an attack speed buff, which of course is great for, on hit crit users, whatever. Auto attacking crit users. I shouldn't say on hit. Obviously, this is a crit item, not an on hit item. But yeah, that's interesting. So this is what did it. Is they redesigned Yun Tal. Now it's actually an item. Very interesting. So if you are a crit user, you will for sure be seriously considering Yun Tal, and it looks like with what people are building, probably just defaulting into Yun Tal as the first item, and then you probably go like IE second. So my question would be, when we go to back to this, because of the AD carry changes, obviously we have Caitlyn and Jhin being very dominant with Collector. So I'm kind of curious about the other ones. So the other AD carries that are up here is you've got like Jinx being a crit user. And so most of the time people are going Yun Tal, IE. You can also, like I said, alternatively go Yun Tal and then a second crit item and then IE. And they're somewhat comparable. I think that they look like they're doing totally fine. Maybe we can take a look at like Lolalytics and see if we get somewhat of a different result here or something, but probably not. How are the items doing? So Yun Tal as the first item is outperforming Kraken. But Collector and Infinity Edge are actually doing quite well as well. Not that Infinity, I think this is wrong. This is probably a sample size bias, because that shouldn't be. And then second item, what are we thinking about second item? Oh, whether you want IE or Runanance. Oh, I keep calling it Runanance. People pointed this out last time. It's Runan's Hurricane, not Runanance. I'm going to keep calling it Runanance. I don't care. I think of Runanance Hurricane like banana, if that makes sense. That probably doesn't make any sense either. We might be cooked. It is 1 a.m. I'm going to sleep soon. I'm just trying to catch up with the game a little bit. So I already got my decay game in for the day. I don't care. I played like... I'm so retired. You know, I have a son. I played like how many games this season? 100? Yeah, I might be retired. Not gonna lie. I might just be retired. And my last couple of games not looking so hot. I might be a little bit rusty right now. That's why I was talking about don't ban players just for being rusty. I might have taken a little bit of a break. I'll be back in form soon enough, don't worry. I'm just not moving my camera around as much as I should and not clicking as fast as I should. But once I get back in the habit of doing that, these guys are dead. Because I'm telling you, the guys in my games right now are not. They got something wrong up here. So we got it. We're coming back. Okay, so we got Bananas Hurricane and... Okay, so Bananas Hurricane or Runan's Hurricane is outperforming... Oh, it's not. IE is outperforming Runan's. So I don't know. Yun Tal, IE. What about other things? So I was thinking about like Rapid Fire. I really like Phantom Dancer. Phantom Dancer is actually performing pretty good here. So not a lot of people are doing this, but you know, it'd be interesting like a Yun Tal into a Phantom Dancer into an Infinity Edge. And actually, if you look, other than like Collector and Infinity Edge being kind of an outlier here, that's actually like if you just pick the highest win rate in each category that are being built frequently, you would actually get Yun Tal, Phantom Dancer, Infinity Edge. Actually, I guess you'd get Yun Tal, Phantom Dancer, and Runan's, but that would just be trolling. That's only because like you have to understand in context, most people would be only going Runan's third if they've already got Infinity Edge. So if you were actually skipping Infinity Edge, that would be really troll. So obviously that's why you use like this tool up here or whatever to select like specific builds. So we could select like we want 3 items. I forget how to even do this. Doesn't really matter. You get what I'm saying. We want 3 items. You have like Yun Tal, Infinity Edge versus Yun Tal Runan's. Yun Tal Infinity Edge is winning. It's being built more and has a 1% higher win rate. It doesn't necessarily mean everything though. But what about Yun Tal, Phantom Dancer, Infinity Edge? Look at that. It's being built a lot less frequently for sure, but it's actually edging out just a tiny amount though. I mean, this is easily sample size bias or error, but it actually has a slightly higher win rate, 0.07, but it has slightly higher win rate than the Yun Tal Infinity Edge rune ends. So this is actually a good option, but we'll see if anybody actually tries that. Anyways, so that's what's going on with those 80 carry items. And then what did they do to barrier? Oh, they nerfed the shield on barrier. I wonder, but I still see people running barrier, so I guess they decided that barrier is not better than heal. So, I mean, I think, you know, obviously if I'm in 80 carry and I see barrier nerfed, even if it's just by 20, I'd want to look at what is heal giving, what is barrier giving, should we be going back to heal? So I'll give my opinion real quick on if we should be going back to heal. So heals your champion and the allied champion nearest to the cursor. Uh-oh, this is the wrong wiki again. It's tiny. 80 to 318 based on level, while also granting you both 30% bonus total movement speed for 1 second on a 240-second cooldown. Oh, we probably need to just pull up barrier. So barrier is a shorter cooldown, being 3 minutes instead of 4 minutes. And it gives 100 to 460, whereas heal gives 80 to 318. Barrier can't be reduced in half like ignite can, or like heal can with ignite. I've made the point before though about ignite that while they're probably igniting the primary target, when you heal, it's not actually reducing, even if you're ignited when you heal, it's not actually reducing heal by 50%, because for one, grievous wounds is 40%, not 50%. I think a lot of people round that just to kind of think about it easier when you're looking at like, oh, well, I get an 80 heal, so instead I'm getting 40, or I'm getting 100 barrier, so I'm getting 50. But of course, 10% makes a gigantic difference. So number one, it's 40%, not 50%. And then number two, if you're healing two people who are actually missing that much HP, you're gaining, you're not reducing by 40%. You're only reducing by like, I guess 20% if you're cutting it in half, right? If the other person's getting the full heal. Is that how math works? I might be too tired to figure that one out, but you get the point, right? Like one person's heal is not getting cut at all, and the other person's heal is getting cut. So let's say that you were healing for 100. You're actually healing for 200 because you're giving it to two people. And even if one person is ignited and they lose 40 health and gain 60, you get 160 healing from the heal. So going from 200 healing to 160, is that 20%? Would be 40 on 200. That sounds like it's 20%. I don't know. Yeah, that's 20%. Okay, so my thing is like, heal is giving you way, way, way more value. Because again, if you're at 80 versus 100, we're talking about a 20 heal difference, and you're giving the heal, or a 20 health difference, and you're giving the heal to two people. So heal is going to give in a fight in bot lane 160 health, and barrier is only going to give 100, talking about it like a level 1. And again, even if you get ignited, you're not even healing for 100. So you're only healing for 80, so 40% of that is even lower. But even if you just call it 40, you're still healing for a lot more than you get from barrier. It's just that it's split between two people instead of one. But if you're using your health bars effectively, you should be healing, like you should be benefiting from heal way more, no, in a 2v2 if you like you're utilizing your health bars correctly. The only time barrier would be better is if you're healing so late that you need it all on one person because that one person is getting focused down completely. But in most bot lane fights and skirmishes and all-ins, it's not 100% focus on one person. Usually there's a, at least some damage being taken by the other person, or especially if the support is any good, especially if you're playing with a Braum, the Braum is going to be able to eat a decent chunk of damage, and the more health you give them to play with in the lane, the more they're actually going to be able to defend your health bar by walking forward more and things like that. Maybe, again, in lower elo, maybe supports don't do this that well, but I think in higher elo, supports utilize their health bar quite well. And so especially a champion like Braum is obviously like going to put himself in harm's way in order to try to protect his AD carry self bar. So the thing that I feel like is, yes, heal can get reduced by ignite, but and yes, it's a 1 minute longer cooldown, but the cooldown's super long on any summoner spell because you're using it very infrequently. So a minute cooldown sounds like a long time when you say it's like a 60-second longer cooldown, but it's really not that big of a deal because when you think about it in terms of how many times am I going to get a good heal off during a game versus how many times am I going to get a good barrier off, you don't use your summoner spells frequently. Heal and barrier are not a summoner spell you're necessarily trying to use on cooldown. They're summoner spells that you're getting off 5 times a game, and you hope that they're high value. And the cooldown on heal does not mean that you get 6 barriers a game and 5 heals a game. It's like on average, you're going to get like, 5.2 heals a game and you're going to get like 5.5 barriers a game or something like that. And it makes very little difference, the cooldown actually. At least it makes a lot less of a difference than you would think that it would when you're just comparing the time, because you hold on to these summoner spells, they're defensive summoner spells, and you're not spamming them on cooldown, and they're meant to be long cooldowns anyways, where you're just holding them for very important big usage. The other thing is you can use heal even if you're into ignite. You can outplay the ignite by healing early if you know that the fight is going to go a certain way. So I'm of the opinion that as long as your support is good enough to utilize the health that you're giving them to do more damage or to protect you or to allow you to do more damage, you're getting more value from heal for sure. That's not even to mention the fact that, of course, on top of the healing versus the damage reduction from barrier, you also get the movement speed on both players from heal. So I'm a really big advocate right now of AD carries need to go back to heal, to be honest with you. So that's where I stand on that. I'm glad we looked into it. I'm sure AD carries are still taking barrier. They can do whatever they want. Yeah, we see here they're like all still taking it. Let's see, like some of the common champions, like Caitlyn, Jhin, barrier cleanse, barrier. It's all barrier cleanse. They're not even considering heal. I think AD carries should go back to heal. That's my opinion. Okay, and then they changed smite. But I had been taught, I don't remember the exact context, but I think I said this, this is only a 20 shield nerf. So I don't want people to freak out and think that like, oh, this nerf to barrier should cause people to go back to heal. I've just always thought, or not always, but like even going back a few patches before this, I've been saying, I looked at heal, I looked at barrier. I think maybe heal should just be better if you're using it well, and that sort of thing. Okay, smite, epic monster, targeting forgiveness. So this is like the width or the area, the circle around your smite that you're going to be able to hit the epic monster. And, they're reducing that so that smite has to be a little bit more precise and accurate. And I like that. So I think this is a good change. Make smiting a little bit harder. It's definitely annoying if you were filled jungle, but I'm not used to that. But, I think this is a good change that adds a little bit more skill expression to jungle. Okay, and then the final patch is this one, 1423. And it looks like they're doing some bounty adjustments. And then Collector and Yun Tal, which, so there we go. Maybe they're going to nerf Collector and Yun Tal after we've just seen them get buffed. And then Youmu's, they're doing something again to Youmu's. Griefing in Champion Select. We highlighted this in the August dev blog, but anti-griefing efforts are still underway and we're expanding them in this patch. What's in our sights now is lobby hostage taking in Champion Select. This means demonstrating intent to sabotage your teammates, whether it be forcing a hostile role swap or threatening other players in the lobby. Starting with patch 14.23, offenders participating in these behaviors will find themselves taking a break from playing League for a bit. As always, it's important to recognize that we are not and will not be penalizing off-meta decisions. The key here is distinguishing intent. While differentiating between the two can often be difficult, we will continue to improve our automation efforts. In the meantime, you can help by using the report function judiciously. So it sounds like I don't know that they're actually going to do anything, but it sounds like they're going to take a harsher approach to punishing people who get reported in Champion Select. QR code login. Why would that be easier than typing your password in? Okay, I'm just going to pull out. Nobody likes this. Okay, that's fine. I mean, you don't have to use it, right? It's whatever. Okay, cool. You can log in with the QR code. Okay, what did they do to the items then? It's pretty straightforward. Collector up 50 gold. That does absolutely nothing. They nerfed, or they buffed the cost, right? They gave you back 450 gold, and they're like, it's the most built item in the game. It's overbearing compared to other AD items. But, we'll just nerf it by 50 gold. That's so stupid. That's really hilarious, actually. So we'll see in the next patch. When is the next patch? December 11th. So that's what I figure. It's the 7th. So it's going to be between next Tuesday and Wednesday. So that's what I would figure. So they do seem to be on the 2-week schedule. So if it's going to be, when is that? What day is it? Oh, it's Saturday. But only because it's 1 in the morning. So yeah, it'll be in a couple of days. Okay, cool. So, we're already at the point I've had to catch up on 4 patch notes, and I haven't even gone through the champion changes yet. And then we'll be hit with another patch in like 4 days. Man, this game changes a lot. No wonder I don't have time to play. I spend more time reading about the game than I spend playing it nowadays. It's absolutely doomed. Okay, so this is going to have to change next patch, right? Surely they're nerfing it next patch. I think there's a preview out. Maybe we'll take a look at it. But with this many patch notes, I don't know that I could be bothered to do a preview. Youmu's Ghostblade. I'm just kind of curious because we've been following the storyline of these items and trying to figure out what happened. Youmu's Ghostblade. Haunt out of combat movement speed 20 to 20, but 10 for range. So they split it for ranged. Or ranged champions abusing Youmu's? Maybe Jin was like going collector or something. Probably not. You'd probably go collector IE. Raise step, active, bonus movement speed, duration 6 for melee, 4 for range. What range champion is abusing Youmu's? Several ranged hybrid attack casters. Who? I guess I'll never know. It's fine. Doesn't matter. Yun Tal. Wait, they buffed Yun Tal. It's gathered a small audience of crit auto attackers, but it's a bit too weak to actually be worth buying at the moment. Maybe my perception on Yun Tal is just completely off. I thought that it was good because maybe I thought it was good because I was being recommended it on Kaisa in the shop. But maybe Riot was just trying to push this item on people to see if they would try it and if it was good. But they're buffing it, or they already did, right? Well, maybe it's good on this patch. So they buffed it again. So hold on. Okay, so they completely reworked it on this one in a way that was pretty good. You're essentially, what was it? You were paying 50 extra gold for 10 less AD and 25% attack speed. And then eventually you'd get the crit by the time you need it anyways. And then you're losing whatever the serrated damage was, but you're gaining this 30% attack speed for 4 seconds on a 40-second cooldown reduced when you hit people. I guess, the other thing is, if this was the serrated thing, I think Yun Tal would have been broken because of how much damage that would have been, plus what you were getting. But I think that this is actually a little bit weaker than the whatever you want to call it, like bleed damage that it was doing before. So they reduced the cost by 100. So now you're paying 50 less gold for 25% attack speed. This passive instead of the old passive. And eventually you'll get the crit by when you need it, hopefully. And then the attack speed duration was only 4 seconds. That's crazy. Oh, well, that makes sense because it's every auto attack for 4 seconds. It's not like a certain number of auto attacks. Okay, so they're increasing the duration to 6 seconds. Yeah, this is a pretty nice buff to the item. So this should help it a lot. They're definitely pushing it. So we'll see. I think Yun Tal is probably in a good spot, but not as broken as I thought. And Collector's still broken. Bounty adjustments. Our bounty update shipped with fairly safe tunings since we had changed a good number of rules under the hood. Now that they've gone live and are working as expected, we're going to start pulling some of these levers to further adjust how they're playing out in games. We're making champion bounties accrue a little faster for winning players, devaluing them much more significantly for losing players, and letting gold leads contribute toward larger objective bounties overall. I just read that. I'm so fried. I don't even know what I just read. Okay. What did it say? Accrue faster for winning teams or winning players. Because so they're talking about champion bounties? Yeah, champion bounties are accruing faster for people who are ahead, devaluing them much more significantly for losing players, and letting gold leads contribute towards larger objective bounties overall. This is exactly what I worried about when we talked about it at first. I said the way that they did it was a tasteful, tactful approach that didn't go crazy in rewarding too much objective bounty or champion bounty gold. What I'm worried about is that they're going to fundamentally change League. So now we need to get into it. As much as my throat hates it, I'm like going to lose my voice or something if I keep going for much longer. I'm definitely not going to get to the champions, by the way, although that's probably nobody cares because probably you've seen the champion changes or can go through them or whatever, or find other videos, LS and whatnot that go through all of these changes. But there's no way I'm getting through it. We're like 2.5 hours in. But we got to rant about this. So another thing, we talked about the minions being kind of a fundamental element of the way that League works. Like the minion waves walking to lanes, arriving in the way that they do. Another thing that I think that they should not touch that is kind of fundamental to the way that League works is a concept I've often talked about before when I compare League to real sports. And I've done many different types of comparisons with this, but one of the biggest differences between League and sports, like football, over here, is that in sports, baseball, football, soccer, you do not get an advantage if you're already ahead. So once the score is the score, you do not get any advantage for being ahead. In fact, in a game like football, once you score, you actually have to kick the ball back to the opponent. It becomes like their turn, right? So it's like, that's maybe even more dramatic. Imagine if you like scored in baseball and then like that was like the same as getting 3 outs or something. Or like if you scored, maybe you were allowed like a maximum number of points per inning or something like that, like 7 points per inning in baseball or 5 points per inning. 7 points would be a lot in baseball per inning. But let's say you were allowed like a maximum of like 3 points. So it's like either 3 outs or 3 points. And then if you get 3 points, even if you didn't get 3 outs, it's the other guy's turn. So it's even more dramatic in football. But the point is that in all three of those major sports, basketball too, of course. So in all four major sports, you do not get any advantage for being ahead in score. It's just already awarded. Every new turn, whether it's a new, team switching defense and offense in baseball, at like the half inning mark or a new inning, or, team scores in football, has to kick off to the other team, or, in basketball, team scores a point and the other team gets, any change of possession, essentially, the teams are starting on an even playing field. If all of a sudden a team that is behind 10-0 in baseball starts hitting a lot of home runs, there is no disadvantage for being down 10 points to 0 other than that they have to overcome that in order to win. But it doesn't become harder for them to score. The fences don't move backwards on them because they're down 10 points. They don't get less at bats or fewer outs, or more outs or something like that because they're behind. Same thing in football, right? Same thing in all these sports. So traditional sports have an element of anything could happen at any moment because there's no snowballing. There's no advantage for already being ahead. The advantage is baked into the score. Sure, you have to overcome that, but it doesn't become harder to score because you're already behind. In league, it becomes harder to score because you're behind. And that does two things. One thing that it does is really negative. Obviously, it feels bad if you're behind, or if you're watching a game and a team's really far behind, because the game is boring, not unpredictable, too predictable in terms of its outcome, because if a team's getting really far behind, there's just not a lot that they can do. It becomes really hard to accomplish anything when you're behind in league because you're weaker and it's harder to do anything. So if you think of like gaining an objective as scoring, or gaining some huge amount of gold that you want to get somewhere, just doing anything to get a positive advantage, just any form of scoring in league, becomes harder when you're behind. And so that is really, really, really difficult. But most video games work this way. And it's a fair reward, I think, for being better than someone at a competitive game, right? Like, you get your advantage from having beat them earlier, and you get to enjoy the fun of being stronger than them because you did something right early. You get a reward for being stronger than them, or you get a reward, for having beat them, and the reward is being stronger than them. So I think that is a core element, a fundamental piece of the way that League works. And when they make changes to the game that drastically change the way that fundamental element works, even if it might make the spectator sport more interesting, or esports more interesting, or games less predictable or more comebackable, and might want to, make losing games feel less bad, or people want to try harder in losing games. It's a dangerous path to walk down, because if you fundamentally change the game, I don't know how people will react to that. And so it's a huge, huge risk. And if people react negatively because the people who actually play the game a lot want to be rewarded for getting ahead of other people because they're used to the game working like that for 15 years, if you push these bounties too far, again, to the point where it's like, what is the point of getting ahead when there's this wealth tax for getting ahead, where the person who's worse than me and who should be punished and weaker for being bad at the game and making some really stupid decisions in lane and getting themselves killed, now this person just gets, if I ever screw up and die one time, this person gets, maybe I didn't even screw up that bad, but I just happened to die one time in a skirmish or a fight that kind of required that to play out that way, because that can happen. Not every death is necessarily completely terrible, but could be, especially if you do have the bounty, I suppose. But if they're rewarded with, we're talking about on the kill and assist goal, we're talking about like 25% of the gold that you got for getting ahead through getting kills and assists, they can just get back for free if they manage to ever kill you in the entire game, which of course is going to happen. You know, any good player, even on the lowest death champions, is going to die, you know, an average of 3 or 4 times in a game. And again, sometimes you got to die more than that in order to win games. I mean, I die plenty of times, of course, especially as a tank support, but I love dying. I die all the time. You know, and I'm not going to generate as much gold, so I'm not going to have so many crazy bounty problems. But that's just the way that it goes. So I really worry if we were already at players getting 25% of the gold that you earned for beating them back. If we were at 100%, then again, nothing would matter until like the last fights that determine who gets the biggest objectives, like Baron, and who wins the game. So how close is Riot willing to push the objective and champion bounties to 100%? Keep in mind too that if, let's say, the champion bounties are giving 25% of the gold back, but the objective bounties on top of that are also giving another 25% gold back, then we're already at 50%. And if they're changing it again in this patch to increase it, they said they want to, I think they said significantly, we're going to start pulling some of these levers to further adjust how they're playing out in games. We're making champion bounties accrue a little faster for winning players and devaluing them much more significantly for losing players, and letting gold leads contribute to larger objective bounties overall. So they're talking about maybe some pretty substantial changes. So maybe now we're moving from what, like 50% to like 60% of the gold. So if they capture the objective bounties and they capture the champion bounties, all they have to do that is kill like a couple of tier 1 turrets that are basically just like hung pawns that should die anyways at the you know, at certain stages of the game, and you know, maybe manage to get a cross map on some neutral objective, or steal one dragon, which is probably going to happen if they're actually trying to steal every dragon. They're really far behind and there's an objective bounty on it. They are going to capture these objective bounties. They are going to kill every player who has a champion bounty, probably 1 time per game on average. And so if you're willing to give the enemy team 50% of the gold that the winning team earned back as bounties and of objective bounties, and now you're going to buff that, so maybe we're looking at 60%. That's 60% is really harsh. Like, that is really close to pushing the league into that direction of, like, I mean, just think about it, right? Like, at 0%, it's League of Legends, you know, with no bounties or whatever. At 100%, we're playing baseball or football where there's no advantage for being ahead whatsoever. And that's pretty bad. The other thing to keep in mind is, like, it's almost worse than that, because in baseball and football, it doesn't become harder to score, but you contributed to the score, right? There's no score in League. So unless you took turrets that are going to make it easier for you to win the game or outright end the game, anything that doesn't contribute to it outright being easier or faster for you to end the game is meaningless and doesn't do anything for you. And again, like, it becomes hard to take tier 2 turrets, especially like tier 2 mid turrets, like super early on into the game. So if you're the winning team and you have huge bounties and stuff like that on your champions and on objectives, and you're probably not, like, maybe you take tier 2 mid, but you're probably not like making it significantly easier for you to end the game through the turrets that you've taken alone, because a lot of the turrets might end up being meaningless if they're in a side lane, aside from the gold that they give. But again, you're giving the enemy team 50-60% of that gold back in objective bounties if they manage to start coming back. So this is just, I think they're probably pushing it way too far with the bounties. I'm just going to say that. Let's see what they did. Maximum possible contribution from gold leads has been doubled. I'm too tired for this. Maximum possible gold contribution from gold leads for objective bounties has been doubled for larger gold leads. Smaller gold leads are unaffected. So remember back in this, is which patch is it? Is it this one? It's probably weird. They said that they were increasing the value of gold by 25% to the old system pre-patch 1421. So if they increased it by 25%, but then they doubled it for large gold leads, if you have a large gold lead, gold differences are contributing 50% more to objective bounties than they were before patch 1421. And in terms of raw gold, yes, there's gold coming from CS and stuff like that, and you're getting some value from XP like we talked about for getting ahead. But what's really depressing is when you get into the numbers, because you're getting 25% of the gold back that somebody earns through kills and assists, all the gold that the enemy team is earning through kills and assists, you're getting 25% of that gold back, and then you're getting like 5% of the gold back from minion kills, and then you're not giving any objective bounties. In fact, you become even worth less gold. The objective bounties and the champion bounties are probably sitting at somewhere like, if you manage to get the objective bounties and the champion bounties that are in the game, you probably are getting 50% of the gold that team earned, maybe more after this one, maybe 60%, somewhere between 50 and 60% of the gold that team earned through killing and getting assists on your team. You earn 50 to 60% of that gold back through capturing those things, through like getting 5 kills one time in one team fight, or getting even just 3 picks on the 3 biggest objective or champion bounty players later in the game, and getting a few basic turrets later in the game. You almost have to wonder too if, like, and turrets don't even give any XP, and XP is really the big underdog kind of secret OP thing here, because XP is not contributing to any of this stuff. And so if you get a big XP lead, it just can't be turned around any other way. So generating XP is really, really important and really underrated. And so you generate XP, very, very important. But you're getting 50 to 60% of the gold back that team earned from kills and assists. That's so crazy. That's like so far away from what you would think of when you think of League of Legends. And if you add all the things in there, it might be even more than that. So that's crazy. And then you have champion bounties. Devaluation is more aggressive for the losing team. It will kick in sooner. It can be 2 to 4 times as potent, and is much more likely to fully suppress champion bounties on the losing team, especially with the shift in objective bounties above. Kills and assists contribute toward positive champion bounties 14% faster, though, when you start coming back. So that's really crazy. We'll see. So that's it for the major system and item changes that happened. Mostly it was like the objective bounties and a lot of AD carry itemization. Go back and look at these things. Guess they did like barrier, some runes, smite. Oh, the minion speed thing was a big one. So the main things were like the objective bounty system in these 4 patches, the AD carry itemization, and the mid lane minion movement speed. And then I guess some miscellaneous item and rune changes and that sort of stuff. I'll have to go back through the champion changes maybe on my own later, but this one's too long. A lot of thoughts on this. Let me know what you guys think. Good night and good luck in solo queue, and have a wonderful day.